is Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast.
When I started creative computing, there weren't even personal computers at that point. I was convinced, I guess, that they would come about. I had no idea it would be 3 months later that the Altair came about.
This is Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. I'm Kevin Savitz. Dave Ahl was founder and editor-in-chief of Creative Computing magazine, which was the first personal computer magazine. Betsy Ahl was editor of the magazine for nearly its entire run. Creative Computing was published starting in November 1974, was acquired by Ziff Davis in 1983, and ceased publication in December 1985. In addition to Creative Computing, Dave and Betsy published a variety of other magazines, including Sync, which was dedicated to the Timex Sinclair computers, and Creative Computing Video and Arcade Games magazine. They also released a record album, First Philadelphia Computer Music Festival in 1979, a board game called Computer Rage, and software for a variety of platforms under the Creative Computing software label. Dave was author of Basic Computer Games, the first million-selling computer book, plus its sequel, More Basic Computer Games, and many other early computer books. After Creative Computing, Dave was editor of Atari Explorer magazine for 5 years, and he started Atarian magazine in 1989. Later, he published Military Vehicles magazine. This interview took place on April 3rd and 4th, 2013, when I was doing research for a book about the first personal computer magazines. Although I've decided not to write that book, I'm publishing the interviews that I did for them. The other major interview was with Wayne Green. There's a link to that interview in the show notes. The first part of this interview took place in a bar at the Heathman Hotel in Portland, Oregon. There's some ambient background noise and music. Remember, this recording was meant to be my notes for a book, so a little background noise wasn't an issue. The second part of the interview was recorded in my dining room, a much quieter atmosphere. The day before this was recorded, Dave and Betsy attended a grand opening get-together of tech luminaries at the Living Computer Museum in Seattle, Washington. This event is mentioned several times during the interview. A full transcript of this interview is available at computingpioneers.com. Also, there are many links to related articles, interview, and magazine scans in the show notes at ataripodcast.com.
So I'm interested in how you guys got together. Was it was it an office romance or what?
Well, it started before then. I was working at Drew University, and I was dating the computer science professor, and he invited Dave. He was a subscriber to Creative Computing. I can remember being in his house and picking up a copy of this magazine and thinking, Creative Computing? Laughing, like, what kind of a title is that? And but he invited Dave to come speak to one of his classes. And while he was there, he said, "Oh, I should stop by your placement office. We're starting to expand. I'm looking for some people, right? Am I getting this right?" And I was looking for other opportunities, so I sent him my resume. And many months later, he hired me. And
She still smarts about that.
that's right.
That I interviewed her in I don't
you
know,
interviewed
April
me
or so.
on April 17th, and you did not hire me till August 1st.
A lot was going on that year.
And,
that year.
So,
78.
it was a really long time after that we got married. We didn't. That was it was 10 years later. We didn't get married till 10 years later. But
And actually, I had hired Betsy as our business manager. That's what I really needed because.
Not a wife.
Pardon?
Not a wife, but
not wife.
Well,
not wife
but
or
not
editor.
even not at that point. We had two buildings.
We had one.
The magazine. Oh, okay. Well, I was looking for.
Well, my first job was to find another
We were
building.
just expanding like crazy, and I had just. And in fact, one of the reasons that I didn't hire her sooner, I just left my job, my day job at AT&T, and was facing up to, oh my gosh, can I afford to take a salary out of creative computing? Yes, we have expanded a lot, but can I even pay myself, much less other senior people? And finally, I left AT&T in July, and finally by August it kind of became clear I really have to get this administration, that end of things, under control. The editorial was okay. I mean, I had enough outside contributors along with what we were doing in-house that I could continue with that. But it was the other end of things where we really had some problems. So then we go to two separate facilities, and one was a two-family house on one side of Morristown, and the other was a converted greenhouse garage, which is where I started. And so Betsy was in the one, in the greenhouse garage. That was the administration side of things, and I was over the house, and that was the editorial and art and
software.
Putting the magazine together. Pardon?
Software,
yeah, right. And so she would come over from her place to my office, every day or two. Just let me know what's going on, and we'd get together. But it wasn't until, I don't remember the date, when Betsy was kind of saying, well, I'd like to get into...
No, well, I had spent all my summers in college and two thereafter working at our local newspaper, weekly newspaper, writing and editing and putting the whole thing together. So I think I more or less just said, we've got all these new product announcements that we don't have anybody to do. Why don't I just do them?
Yeah.
So I started out doing the press releases and things.
Her newspaper experience was largely, first in high school, was covering sports, covering the lesser sports.
Covering the unpopular sports as a senior in high school, because they didn't want a girl to publish to write about the important sports. So they let the girl write about the unimportant sports, which turned out to be the winning sports. But this small New Jersey high school, but that's how I started.
And then at the newspaper, you started by writing obituaries, right?
Well, it's one of the things I did. I was like, I always wanted to be a Spanish teacher. I didn't know anything about this, so I got this sports writing job by way of a babysitting job. I babysat for the publisher's kids, and on the way home one night, he said, we always have a boy from the school who writes about the sports reports for the paper. Do you know anybody? And I said, well, I know the guy who did it last year, and if he can do it, I could do it. And so I did that, and then didn't think much more of it, went off to college, came back over spring break, and ran into the guy in the grocery store, and he said, would you like a job working for the paper this summer? And I said, sure. I had no idea whether he wanted me to sweep the floors or what, but it was a job, so I took it. And it was in the editorial department, and I learned from some very serious journalists who had worked for a very good paper, the Newark Evening News, which was a serious paper that probably was too serious and folded, but probably in the mid-'60s. But these people were they were good journalists, and they taught me a lot. But I think it was that first year, about halfway through the summer, the editor had been on vacation, and then the publisher was the publisher was on vacation, the editor was going to go on vacation, and when the publisher came back, and the publisher, on the day that he was supposed to come back, had appendicitis, had to have an appendectomy, which back in those days was a much bigger deal than it is now. And the editor said, well, I'm leaving. And so there I was running this little paper.
Yeah. So I figured
learned
if
a
she
lot.
could run a newspaper, even though it's just a summer job, she could do a lot for us. And Betsy continued to handle the administrative things for really quite a while, and as she said, probably was initially doing new product releases because you get just tons of them over the transom, and from these smaller companies.
You'd get a press release and then you'd rewrite it and
Well,
blurb, I mean, that sort of thing.
We had a new product section, and, it was a format, a style for them, for each one, If they sent a photo, you did the photo, and a little cut line for it, and, basically what I would do is let them pile up, and then sort through, figure out which ones were worthy of attention, and that was kind of just filler. They ran in one column, and, when you came to the end of the paper, end of the magazine, whatever you had left over, you would fill in with these.
Yep. And the thing is that the companies that were putting out these press releases, I mean, this is back in the 76, 7, so tiny little companies. They had no marketing expertise, so they were sending us, in some cases, not quite handwritten, but pretty crude. So it took some editing and some real work to make them readable. And then, as Betsy said, you had to guess. Okay, which one? This is a significant product, but is this guy going to be able to make this company go, or is it just going to, flop? And we tried to be responsible to the readers, reporting on things that weren't just a wonderful, great new idea, but something that they were going to have on the market that was going to get some support and everything else. So anyway, that was a long story of how we got together.
I still don't know how you got together.
We were working in an office, like about as large as this banquette here, together, because when we first started working together, we didn't have this other house. So it was the two of us. You had an actual desk, I believe. I had a table that he had made out of particle board.
Fancy.
Yeah, it was fancy, and I had to put duct tape along it because the edge was making holes in my clothes. So we worked in this office back to back, and just sort of got to know each other, and became friends, little by little. And one of the reasons that he said to me, when you're looking for this building, he said, it would be a good thing if there was a place for me to live because I'm in the process of getting separated from my wife. Which it turned out you didn't do right away, but eventually you did. Right?
Well, it was 3 months later. That was right away, in a sense. What precipitated that was that we had a woman that was working in the mailroom, and she got in cahoots with somebody in the accounting department, and they started working a little embezzlement.
Is this a DEC or
Pardon?
At Creative Computing.
No, at Creative Computing. This was just after Betsy was hired. In fact, they had it going on before, and I mean they were very good at it. What they did is they set up a bank account in the name of Creative Computing in the next county, and they would take every fourth or fifth check, and it might be a subscription, it might be paying for an ad or something.
It was mostly the advertisers.
And it was both. And then they'd put that into their bank account. And then the one that was in the accounting department would mark the thing as paid. Or...
No, she didn't. That was her mistake.
Well, she didn't...
Because that wasn't her job.
She blew one... in any event, it was my advertising manager that we had sent an overdue notice to one of the advertisers. Huh?
It was Apple.
It was Apple?
It was
Okay.
Regis McKenna. It was Apple's agency.
And they said, we paid that. And this woman said, well, send me proof. And they did. And we look at the bank where it was deposited. And then, and then we called in local detective police department, and they got the bank records and said, how much do you think this was? Well, no, they didn't say that. They said, this is probably a lot more than you thought. And turned out to be well over $100,000. And our total annual, not even profit at that point, but, sort of, the gross was just about $1 million at that point. Not quite, but close to it. So 100,000 was, that was a big chunk, 10%.
What year was this?
78. And so obviously we fired these two. And then the court finally, they determined that they had also, one of them had been involved in welfare fraud and other stuff, and the court ordered them to pay it back at the rate of, I don't know, would have
47 cents a week.
I don't know, it was some tiny amount, and
They never paid anything.
and we got one payment, and that was it.
And she was ordered to do public service as her.
Yeah. But
Like, who wants someone doing public service for them who's done something like that?
Magazines back then, probably any business, but they were a hotbed of intrigue. You had that happen, and then the whole Byte magazine getting stolen. And
so Betsy actually, in response to that, brought
the Byte thing.
In response to the embezzlement, brought in her sister-in-law, Bobby, and I think your mother too.
Was Bobby's mother.
Bobby's mother. Okay, but one to
I was a widow at the time.
Do some of the accounting, because we didn't have an accountant then. And want to just help out and make some calls to advertisers and say, can you speed up your payment a little bit? And also calls to people that we owed money to. Hey, we're going to be maybe a little late. Because it really didn't look good. That was just a huge amount of money, and so we had to stretch things out and hope that the growth continued, that we could cover some of this, and so Betsy really rescued us there, and it was amazing. We finally did stretch things out, but what precipitated the separation with my wife at the time is I went home and I told her this has happened.
It was
and everything.
Thanksgiving weekend.
Thanksgiving, the day
before Thanksgiving.
Day before Thanksgiving is when we got all the information from the police department, and I went home to my wife and she said, "You dumb." Well, I won't even repeat all of the things, but you are so stupid. You trust people. Yes, I trust people, and you shouldn't trust people like that. And get out of the house. And I can't put up with this anymore. So it was a good thing we had a two-family.
So then he moves into had his two-family house.
I moved into the bedroom on one
he had
side.
His office on one side of the bed, the top floor in the back bedroom, and his bedroom in the back bedroom on the other side, and his kitchen.
Is this the place I was reading about where your bedroom was above the kitchen?
Yes. The Ted Nelson. Yep.
So, anyway, that was a lot of things kind of precipitated, and then because of that we had to make some other changes in personnel and move some people around, and I think after that then Betsy took more of a role in the editorial end of things, but in any event.
Until the bitter end.
The bitter end. Actually, I was there after he was gone because Ziff continued to pay me for several months after they closed the magazine to stay behind and clean up this. We had a 75,000 square foot building, and make sure that we don't dispose of the hardware and just basically do all the get it ready. So
when you quit at the phone company to start a magazine, that must have been scary.
Well, had left Digital Equipment in 1974, and I'm sure you read the whole rationale behind that, and joined AT&T in marketing, educational marketing. Same thing I was doing at DEC, but obviously marketing different products to a different mix of customers. Then two years into it, AT&T has a real, back then, and perhaps today, they have a real formula that you're in a job for 2 years and then they rotate you out or they put you in another job. And I was supposed to, and the way AT&T works is that they have certain steps. So there's a manager and then a director level and then the levels, 1, 2, 3, 4. And the operating companies like Pacific Bell and so on have similar steps that are considered a half step below AT&T. So what they do is they rotate you out to an operating company, a half step promotion, they rotate you back into AT&T, now you're full step. You never get a full step in one company. So they had offered me a rotation to Southern Bell. Birmingham, Alabama. No. And then probably 2 or 3 months later said, okay, we've got an opening in Wisconsin, Tel. Oh my gosh. Come on, let's something sensible. So I turned them down, which was bad. I mean, you can't turn down another, if you turn down 3, you might as well retire. So the third one was in a sense, wasn't a promotion, but it was a sideways jump within AT&T itself. But I went from having the education group, which was about 8 people, to corporate communications, which is about 100 people, and a huge budget. So I was responsible for all of the marketing communications for the whole Bell system. Not advertising, but we had seminar centers and put out all kinds of educational pamphlets and even a magazine for our customers and how to use the equipment. So I was doing that, and it was getting to be it's a big job. It's a 50-hour-a-week job, and then Creative Computing was halfway down the block. I'd go there at lunchtime, see how things were, doing. But as I said a little bit ago, when we reached or looked like we were going to hit $1 million, I said, I got to get serious about this. And so that's when I resigned from AT&T. That was probably the first. I shouldn't say the first, but that was a major problem with my wife at that time. You're leaving AT&T? You're leaving all those benefits? Whoa, what are you doing, you idiot? So we were on the downward spiral at that point. And then the embezzlement just sealed the whole thing. But anyway, yeah. So leaving any job for an unknown thing like you start a little company and you leave your day job. You're making a real commitment.
Even once you were at Creative full time, it seems like you did. It looks like you did did a lot. You did everything. I mean, you were writing, you were doing programming, you were being the editor, the publisher and the editor, which is not done anymore. And
right. I was. I don't know. I don't think I was, and you can correct me. I don't think I was a control freak.
You had Phil Ellenberg you had just hired Phil Ellenberg as the advertising manager. And because Birchie was doing that.
Yeah, right.
And so where did he come from? He came from some respectable place. He came from some respectable place, Phil Ellen.
Yes, he did.
He was like a real person who had a real job, not just like these it's crazy the rest of us. And so he was the ad manager. And so he once you made the step to leave AT&T, then you mostly concentrated on the editorial. You weren't selling ads and writing, and you had Steve North, who was doing a lot of the editorial. And
at the beginning, and the thing is that I'd be lying if I said, I knew how things were going to go. I knew this was going to be a huge, magazine someday. I had no clue. When I started Creative Computing, there weren't even personal computers at that point. I was convinced, I guess, that they would come about. I had no idea it would be 3 months later that the Altair came about. So it was more just kind of, I thought that an educational magazine like we had been publishing at DEC should continue. DEC had dropped off. They stopped publishing Edu when I left the education group. Well, they published an issue or two, but they really weren't serious about continuing it. And then you had all of the people out here on the West Coast, the Hewlett-Packard computers, and they weren't. They were publishing some good software. They had some good arrangements with Minnesota Educational Computer Consortium and some others to distribute stuff that they developed. But there was no kind of information source for schools and teachers and kids that were using computers. And so that's kind of what I envisioned initially. But then, once the Altair and the others came along, people buy this kit computer and say, what can I do with it? Oh, well, we've got these programs that'll run.
First, you have to steal BASIC.
Huh?
First, you have to steal BASIC.
Yeah.
I noticed that, let's see, it started, I don't know what's called, the banner under the words creative computing here, this part here.
What did we call?
The #1 magazine of computer applications.
Well, that was a Ziff Davis thing.
It started off, first issue, the nonprofit magazine of educational and recreational computing.
Right.
That was November 1975. And by May, June 1975, the words nonprofit disappeared.
Right.
The magazine.
Well, it was never. You never set it up as a nonprofit.
I did not.
But you started making a profit.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
it was
right.
the unintentionally nonprofit.
Yeah.
And then 3 years later, you quietly changed it to the #1 magazine of computer applications and software.
That was when Ziff Davis took over.
Oh, really? No, it was 78.
No, that was 78.
Oh, 78. Okay, well,
Stayed
we
with
did.
that until the end.
Right. Okay, you're right. Okay. That was.
So anyway,
Who knows? We changed.
Seemed like a good idea at the time.
Yeah, but it's definitely clearly a shift from education to education plus other things plus.
Yes.
I think it was when he realized that if you actually wanted to make a profit, you had to leave education behind, right? Because teachers want everything for free, or they certainly did then.
Yeah,
There's some websites for teachers that still do.
Right. The schools, teachers, they want everything for free. And they get a lot for free. You get the places like the Huntington Computer Project, Minnesota, MEC. There was one out here, right? Oregon, yes, there was. I think it was based right here in Portland. Well, it would have been, right, if it was in Oregon. But yes, there was a computing consortium at that time, Hewlett-Packard oriented. And then you had a People's Computer Company down in California that was sort of providing stuff to schools. They were mostly into alternative schools. And there were a lot of them in the Bay Area at that time. In fact, there was a magazine or a newspaper, big, thick, thing that I don't know how often they came out, but it was called the D-School Primer, and it was for people that I won't say they were hippies, but they're basically homeschoolers, but they got together and said, okay, we're going to educate our kids outside of the public education system, but we don't want to do it individually. We'll get together and so there was a big movement there, and they were into computers, unlike the public schools back in 75, 76.
Well, homeschooling back then was very avant-garde.
Yeah,
It was
not
not
much to
approved.
not like today. So so we changed. We the shift away from education. Well, that of course was partially driven by the hardware that was then available to people at home. When I first started the magazine, and in fact, I've had 4 editors over the years. Well, 5, I guess. But Steve Gray, and he had been publishing a newsletter that he called the Amateur Computer Group Newsletter, and it was for engineers who were scavenging up old parts from Honeywell and IBM and GE and DEC and trying to put together a computer. And he'd have, success stories, and here's how you can make this work together, and so on. So anyway, that was a long way from an all chair. But that's kind of what I was focusing on, is those people that were doing that, and education. Okay, changed our focus. You're right. Good observation.
Do you feel after that? Do you feel the focus changed in the next 10 years?
Well, the focus changed largely due to selling the magazine to Ziff Davis.
Who's that?
That was in when did the sale? We were negotiating for a while, and I think the sale finally went through in '83. Right, '83. Maybe late '82, but roughly then. And they felt that you need more of a business focus, and small business and people running businesses out of their home, and that's where it started. But then we got into more real small businesses. I shouldn't say real, but a storefront or a small manufacturer or something like that. And that was probably a direction we would not have gone. I wouldn't have gone on my own. I would have stuck pretty.
Well, we had a magazine called Small Business Computing, remember?
That's right, we did. and I would have kept creative more targeted on the home market and and still education to some extent, but more on the home and people that were running a business, a single entrepreneur home. So you could review a spreadsheet, but or a small business computer or higher end printer or something, but not lift it up to that next level up. But hey, that's when you're owned by somebody else and they say this is what we want to do, you got to be responsive to it.
Why did you sell to Ziff? I mean, it was something that had to be done. I read what it's. I've read the official line, but that was.
Well, I think the official line is pretty close to the real line. What happened is the first magazine. Yeah, maybe not the very first, but the first sizable magazine to sell was The Byte, and they sold to McGraw-Hill. And then there were 3 or 4 other sales. And at the time, there were maybe 8 special interest publishers in the country. You know, you had Hearst and CBS magazines and Ziff Davis and about maybe 8 serious ones. There were some others that were kind of, it'd be nice if we could get into it, but, what happened is Byte went from, like all of us at that point, were spending maybe $150,000 on circulation promotion. McGraw-Hill says, we really want to, we want to get out there. We're going to spend $1 million. Whoa. So they're mailing 10 times as much as we are. They're going to trade shows with big elaborate booths and handing out all kinds of,
free magazines.
Well, not only free magazines, but other stuff. So that was half of it. The other half, which was probably more than half, was the advertising sales. We were using reps. We had different reps in different parts of the country, paying the rep, commission on the advertising. But when you are a McGraw-Hill or a Hearst or a Ziff Davis, you've got an in-house staff. You got people that they would have a reception at one of the computer conferences, and big deal. I mean, we used
to have a hospitality suite at the hotels and some of these conferences, and when we would bring like little hunks of cheese that we cut up from home, and and sneak the bottles of wine up the back stairway. And they were having these big things with the giant bowls of shrimp.
Yeah, I mean, it was just an order of magnitude different than what we could do. And so what happened really was that it got to the point where there were only 2 serious bidders that were still looking for a magazine, and there's still about 4 decent quality magazines on the market. And one was Compute, one was Interface Age. Personal Computing had just sold, and there was us, and I forget who the 4th one was, but there were 4.
So there was more magazines than buyers at this point.
That's right. I mean, there were a lot more magazines too, but there were 4 major players, and so. And one of the buyers, I mean, I didn't really regard him as serious, and that was Atari. I think they wanted to back into the thing, But so the 2 buyers were CBS, and they had a magazine division at that time, and Ziff Davis, and that was it. And so, I said, man, I got to make a deal here. And that's what happened. I look back with hindsight. I said, hey, the guy, Robert, I forget his last name, that owned Compute magazine, he held out. He held out to the end, and he says, I'm better than Interface Age, and he was, and whoever the other one was, Family Computing. I'm better than them. And he got a really nice payoff then from CBS, because it was the last one, and they wanted him. And I don't know, if I'd held off a little more, would I gotten more? Yeah, probably. But
How much did you get?
Can we publish this figure?
I don't know. I don't think we ever have.
No, we never have.
That's my chance for a scoop.
Pardon?
That's my chance for a scoop.
I think I'd rather not say. I can tell you that Compute, if you ever read that number, which you will, was 7 times as much. I mean, it was huge. But at that point, I think CBS just said, we got to get into this. We really got to do something. And the big loser was Bob Jones at Interface Age. He had a good magazine. I mean, that was a good, solid magazine. Bob Jones, I mean, he he went to shows. He was always in a suit and tie, and I mean, he would have fit into the corporate environment very well, but he held out too long. And I think he was holding out for even more, and so, boom, and that's what I was afraid of. Less than a year later, he was out of business. There was no way you could compete with these big guys. I mean, Ziff, instantly, I mean, they started having these receptions at the PC expos, and
Well, and they had ad reps all over the country.
ad reps, yeah. Oh my gosh. So you know, we would not have survived.
You timed it right. I mean,
I guess not exactly right, but yes.
It wasn't bad.
Yes, wasn't bad.
But Ziff didn't have it for very long before they let it go. It was only a couple of years.
Well, it was almost 4 years, 3.5 years. They did a study, and this is one of the classic. I mean, I've been making a presentation to different. Actually, over at Bletchley Park last year on the 10 biggest blunders in personal computing, and actually it's up to 12 now. But one was, and I still feel it was huge, is that Ziff Davis analyzed the market in '85 and determined that the home market, the market for home computers, had reached saturation. 5% of the homes have a computer. That's it. No, and so they then said, well, we want to, emphasize. There were three major conclusions from their survey. And I think probably 1.5 of them were pretty good, and 1.5 were just absolutely wrong. The home market reaching saturation was just wrong. The second one was that they said that the magazines that will be successful will be those that are focused on specific brands of computers, because with the you getting a lot?
Yeah, it's quick.
With the IBM PC, it really brought standardization to the industry, and their analysis was that Apple and PC were going to be the dominant players in the future, and in that they were right. So they said we got to have a magazine that's just focused on those two, and they did. I mean, they had. What was their Apple magazine? They had two Apple magazines, huh?
A+.
Well, no, but they also had the one for the Mac.
Mac user.
Mac user, right. So they had two Apple magazines and then PC. And then PC, they spun off a whole bunch of, PC Week and
PC Junior.
PC, yeah, a bunch of them. But in any
PC
event,
Tech.
so they were right from in that thing. The other one that they were, I say, semi-right. In the long-term future, they were totally wrong, but in the short term, they were probably right. And that was that they looked at we had been covering, bulletin board systems, and I don't know, CompuServe, whatever its predecessor was, and basically online
Genie?
type of stuff, huh?
Genie,
yes, yeah. And they said, oh, that's just a flash in the pan, this online stuff. Well, in '85, it was. It took a while
for it to.
Took another 8 to 10 years for that to. But then, oh my gosh! Well, what's happened today, and so if they had stuck with creative computing and rather than trying to make it as a small business focused magazine, but kept the home and the online focus, I mean, we would have owned the internet market today. Absolutely owned. It would have been a bigger magazine than all the others, put together. But that, hey,
I know
hindsight is 20/20.
It wasn't your choice, but do you have regret about that?
Yeah. I mean,
At the time.
huh?
At the time, it was devastating.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely.
It's like someone killing your child.
Yeah, I mean, I just at the time, I mean, we sat in these meetings up at Stamford, Connecticut, of all places, and the reason for that is that Bill Ziff. Well, what happened in the interim, right after, actually a year or two after they purchased Creative Computing and PC, Bill Ziff came down with cancer, really big time, and was afraid he was going to, die next year. And so he was moving all of his resources and holdings outside of New York to avoid, really major taxation. I'm not sure that Connecticut was much better, but he was splitting them between Connecticut and Florida. And anyway, but we wound up having a bunch of meetings up at...
He was trying to maintain residence in Connecticut.
Yeah, I guess that was it.
He was living in the Crown Plaza.
But I remember the last one. We were up at that hotel, and
Crown Plaza.
when they finally,
It was Stamford. It wasn't Hartford.
yeah, Stanford,
I said
where
Hartford.
they came from, finally came to the decision. Okay, we're gonna shut this down. Oh, come on. So that was a devastating time. And we probably could have continued to work for Ziff if we'd been willing to go into New York, but you know what, when you get used to working a mile or two from where you live, the idea of commuting into New York, and who knows what the job would have been, so we just said, bye. And that was it. But yeah, it was in retrospect a mistake. Oh, well, the other thing that happened as a result of Bill Ziff and having this bout with cancer is that Ziff Davis sold off all of their other special interest magazines. Popular boating, popular photography. They
Yachting, Modern Bride.
Yeah, and they had a whole big
Stream.
group of travel magazines. And actually, one of the things I did after Creative Computing was just shut down. We got friendly with the publisher and some of the people in the travel division, and we started doing some freelance travel writing. I was writing a monthly column for one of the travel magazines that went to travel agents on automating your travel office and so on, and which was an interesting thing because they're a small business that really depended upon computers with the reservation systems, and all the airlines had a different reservation system. You had to have Sabre, you had to have
That was a travel agent. So.
and yeah, I mean so a lot of them didn't have, they'd go with one and make an agreement with somebody else to make their other reservations, and in any event, it was a bad system, and so I would try writing a column on how to make this work for you, and anyway, but as you know, I don't know how many months later that we got into the Atari camp.
So that was your next gig?
Yeah, and it was Joe Sugarman, remember, that hooked us up with Atari?
Really?
After you took
I thought it was Neil Davis or Neil Harris.
He was the one we worked with, but it was Sugarman that
Because
said,
he came from Commodore.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was Joel Sugarman.
He ran a company called JSNA with Joe Sugarman and Associates, and they were the first ones that took these full-page ads in lots of different magazines and a quarter-page.
The first advertorials.
Places like Wall Street, advertorial, first print advertorials, really serious stuff. Out of that, he spawned at least a dozen other companies. Sharper Image a Sugarman's, in a sense, spin-off, and where they got a whole page just focused on this air ionizer or some crazy product. But he sold, tons of that stuff. And then he started offering courses. But he was on the verge of doing some big deal with Atari, and so he knew all the people out there. I had taken his course and started running ads. In fact, there's probably one in one of those issues that is basically a Sugarman ad. So anyway, and you took the course too. So we got to know him. He got to know us. And we kept up. And okay, creative computing is folded, and I'm trying to get something going with Atari and getting their magazine really serious. And so he was the one that hooked us up with them. By the way, I'm surprised that you don't have Atari Explorer on your website.
Well, the deal with my Atari Magazine's website is I've always strove to get permission, and Atari can't be owned by the same company for more than 3 months at a time.
It's hard to get permission that way.
Get permission, and anyway. So, but it's out there elsewhere there's other archivists who don't bother to get permission, and that's another good way to do things. And so yeah, it's out there. I think archive.org has it.
Really? Yeah, because I hadn't seen. I was looking for something. So, I still get inquiries every once in a while from somebody that wants something in one of the previous magazines that we've published.
That's why I don't. There's a few magazines that just, absolutely not, because it's owned by some giant monolith corporation now, and they need to hold on to everything, even if it's 30 years old.
Yeah, because someday they might be able to make money from it.
Right.
Yeah.
Talk to me about. You did some weird stuff. Okay. Well, weird stuff I'm thinking of is the board game.
Computer Rage.
Yes.
We just saw that. We might not have even remembered what it was but we saw it last night.
They have one in the sort of the collections area of the computer museum, and they didn't even know that we'd published it. And I thought, look at this! Whoa!
So you did Computer Rage, which was weird. I want to ask about that. And you did the record album.
Well, that's that. Okay,
the record album made way more sense than the game.
Yeah. Well, it was a guy. What was his last name? Allen, who was the colonel at that time, that came to me with the idea for the computer game.
Yeah.
He was a colonel in the army and had something to do with educational programs and so on in the army, and said, I think people should know more about how computers work and everything else, and the games that are on the market are pretty tacky and not fun, and so I've devised something, and we worked together with him and finally decided, all right, we'll publish this game. He's, by the way, he's a general and finally retired.
But he's not financing his retirement with royalties from Computer Rage.
Not at all.
Did anybody buy that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, it was
we did overprint.
Yeah. It wasn't a big seller, but it wasn't. It wasn't. They say a big seller or a big success, but we did. We sold enough of them.
Yeah.
Now the record was a little different. There was a guy named Dick Moberg, who at the time was the president of the Philadelphia Area Computer Society. And the first two personal computer festivals were actually in New Jersey. Not the West Coast Computer Fair came later with Jim Warren and that group. But John Dilks started this computer festival in Atlantic City, and this was before Atlantic City was a big casino place. It was just,
it was a casino place. But
but it was just pretty tacky. In any event,
Yeah, like not like now where it's so classy.
yeah. So in any event, they were having some issues with the the hotel and the convention center in Atlantic City, and Dick Moberg said, "Hey, we people in Philadelphia can do a better job than you guys in New Jersey," and he got together with what was his name? Lenny and
Saul Liebes.
Saul Liebes, and who was the president of the New Jersey Amateur Computer Group, and the two of them got together and said, "Yeah, it'll be more convenient if we do a thing in Philadelphia." And Saul Liebes, he had put together the first Trenton Computer Festival, and it wasn't a big, huge thing. It's gotten to be gigantic. But in any event, so they said, okay, we'll do this. And at that point, this was 78. A lot of, the Apple had just come out, and people were making little plug-in peripherals, and there was a company in it, I'm not going to be able to remember who it was. They made a nice little plug-in board for the Apple, and what they had is a very nice thing on the screen where you could position notes and then have them played back. So it was a visual programming of music. That
Series music instruction set?
Pardon me? No, it was.
There were ad for it.
It was a guy out of Denver. I don't remember. Anyway, but before that, everything had to be, entered line by line. But there were some reasonable playback systems that were starting to come on the market for the S100 bus. There were about 4 of them. The programming was a little bit hairier, but nevertheless, they sounded okay. And then there was still the leftovers, in a sense, of people that were doing work on mainframes to process music. So Dick Moberg said, wouldn't it be cool if we could get a number of these together? And of course, there's the Philadelphia Orchestra. We'll make it a Philadelphia Computer Music Festival, and so it was largely his idea. But then, how do you publicize it? Well, you got this magazine that's in your backyard that was willing to, recruit some people and publicize it. So we got about, I don't know, at the festival there were probably 25 or 30 people that had stuff, and they recorded it all, and which was in retrospect a bit of a mistake, because they had problems with one of the 2 channels in the stereo. They had the big reel-to-reel tape recorder, and one of the channels was seriously too low. And anyway, then they said, "Oh, we got this wonderful tape, but what are we going to do with it?" And I said, "Well, I'll do something with it." And I hooked up with a studio in the city that made records, and we went in there and corrected the low channel a little bit, not totally, but enough that it was, it sounded like stereo, and put together a vinyl record. It was about, I edited out a lot of the poorer quality performances, and made the record, and that sold pretty well. Our biggest problem was shipping. How do you ship a 12-inch vinyl record without it breaking. But that sold pretty well. That, of course, died off along with everything else when Creative Computing got killed by Ziff. But I still had the original test pressing of that, the original, and I played it back, and it sounded, very, very good. Put it into I forget what the software was, but it was one where the digital routine. It would have been nice if I still had the original tape, but I didn't. But so, okay, it's got a little bit of deterioration going to a record. But on the other hand, we're not talking about losing overtones of a violin up at 15,000 hertz. It was within a narrow band to begin with. And in any event, but that really did let me totally correct the left channel and bring it up to, what it should be. So I put that out, and selling CDs now of that. And in fact, a guy from Australia ordered one, and obviously the postage to send anything overseas is a lot more. And he said, why don't you just make MP3 files out of it? And because they're WAV files the way they are now. Oh, okay. So I downloaded some. This is very recent, like within the last couple of weeks. Downloaded some software to convert WAV to MP3, converted it, sent them the files, and that's great. And so I think what I'll probably do is try to figure out how I can make them available, from a website.
You've apparently forgotten that, like, 10 years ago I did that. They were there.
Yes, I know.
Computermusic.com.
Okay, are they MP3? Oh, okay. All right. Well, then I don't have to do it. Jeez. Boom. Bam. I did remember that. I didn't know that you did them all.
Oh, yeah.
I thought you did a sample of it.
Well, no, they're all there.
They're all there. Okay.
I can shoot you the MP3 files.
Boom. Okay. Well, so I waste a little time. I waste a lot of time these days. But yeah, that was a cool thing.
That you guys were willing to take chances with weird stuff, and
Well, that where we took chances with really weird stuff was in the software. We had this
software publishing.
Yeah, we had it was a brand called Sensational Software. Unfortunately, Ziff decided it was competing with some potential advertisers, which it was in a sense, and so they killed it off. But we had some really good stuff. We had the Apple game. What the heck? Well, anyway, it was ported over directly from an arcade game.
Was it Space Invaders?
Space Invaders.
Like a clone of Space Invaders.
It was the real. I mean, it was because Space Invaders on the Japanese game was one of the first full-size console video games where they used a general-purpose chip, and Space Invaders was programmed for the 6502 Apple, and so we bought it from this Japanese company, and we had the only real Space Invaders game. So that was one, that and a couple of others that we could have really gone places with, but that was just about the time that Ziff came in and said, you can't have this anymore. All right. They were into printed media, so they kept the books going, but not any of the other stuff. The other thing we had was speaking of computer music, had a little division that probably could have gotten a lot bigger called Peripherals Plus. and we were marketing a little computer music board. It was an S100 bus but if we had then started making one.
Didn't we have a plotter too?
We had and we had about 5 or 6 interesting low-level products. But again,
that stuff was really competing with advertisers, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, obviously we weren't. That wasn't our intent, but yes, it was. Yeah. We also offered courses at that time. You remember at County College?
I don't.
That was just that when we moved into the new building in Hanover. We had 2 people that were doing that.
Oh, one of them was that crazy Larry guy.
Yeah.
He was seriously weird.
But yes, County College of Morris, we kind of reached an agreement that we would teach their introductory computer course, not for their day students, but they offered what do you call it, the evening courses for people that adult. So we were doing that. Fingers in a lot of pies at that point. And actually, from that standpoint, it was probably good that Ziff got us a little bit more focused on, just back to the roots of publishing. Getting spread a little thin.
All right, so you went to Atari, got the Atari gig, and you did this Atari Explorer, right?
Atari Explorer, and then the last year there, they decided that they had an occasional publication, not really a magazine, but one that was focused on the games, and they decided that we could, they could start that up again, and that was It started up with a new name. We called it Atarian. And it was focused basically on video games. And, you buy one of their video games and you get an issue or, anyway, there are different ways that they were going to promote it. But a year later, Nintendo just absolutely buried Atari, 89. They kept Atari Explorer going for, I think, 2 more issues. John Jane Cake, right?
Yeah.
Was it 2?
I don't remember the details.
It wasn't much.
I remember why they killed it.
Miss Feisty here.
Okay, they were.
Come on, you gotta tell a story here.
They were playing games with our printer. We always had a production schedule. Every magazine had a production schedule, and we never missed our production date or getting things to the printer, getting the mail. We just did it because that's what you had to do. And Atari started, I will probably get sued for this. Atari started not paying the printer, and the printer says, we're not going to print this till we get paid. And so the date kept slipping and slipping, and then the subscribers would be calling up and saying, "Where's my magazine?" And this went on for it was a bi-monthly, went on for maybe 6 months. And so I finally wrote an editorial in which I explained to the readers exactly what was going on. And they didn't see it till it was printed.
That didn't get into the magazine.
It did.
That's right. It did. Yeah, because they
never saw it, because we were printing and we were, producing it out of in Mendham, New Jersey, and printing it in Easton, Pennsylvania. So we just deliver them. Yeah. And they never saw it until it was too late. But my tenure was cut short. But I didn't really care at that point. I was sick of them. Yeah. It was really hard. They're not easy people to deal with, even when they stay, even when their owners last for more than 3 months. So that was kind of my suicide by editorial. Only time in my life I've ever been fired.
We did, when I say, I didn't realize they did read that beforehand, but I should have. But, you know.
Wouldn't have gotten fired if they had.
A lot of things, that was you know, kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, but
then John Janeshee kept on doing it.
Well, I know. But in a lot of cases, particularly with the games magazine, they wanted to approve everything that went in it. Well, you know, sometimes if you do an objective product review, you know, you call it like it is, and oh my gosh, there was one wasn't just a one product, but a roundup after one of the after Consumer Electronics Show, and I don't remember which one it was, but you know, Atari had brought out some new products that really weren't ready to go, and so in some cases I just said, you know what, I'm not even going to say anything about this one or these two or three. I'll focus on the ones that are ready to go, or you know, are in good shape. And oh my gosh, but what about this? This is a wonderful thing. Well, maybe it will be, but it isn't yet. And so we had issues all along on censorship and them, you know, changing you know, what we had written and everything. And as Betsy said, they were not nice people to work with. I forget who the two brothers that
Trammell.
Trammells, yeah.
Jack and
came from
somebody else.
Commodore.
Jack and
his brother.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting because yesterday I saw Nolan Bushnell, and he was at that event, and you know, Nolan was he flamboyant and but basically he had integrity, and he was an honest guy, and man, oh man. Yeah. Didn't stay. The corporation changed after he left.
So then you were done with Atari, and then was it straight to military vehicles there, or was there?
Well, there was a hiatus.
No, we published magazines, in-house magazines for a couple of the other corporations. Did one for Nabisco. Called, I don't even remember, but it was for their marketing department, and published that for some period of time, and then they decided to bring it in-house.
It was more like a newsletter, it wasn't?
16 pages. It was getting there. Huh? 16
pages is a newsletter.
All right. Well, all right. Magazine format. Put it that way. And we did some fulfillment. Basically, freelance, a lot of freelance writing in the travel field.
Stuffed dogs. The stuffed dogs. Remember those Ford dogs?
Fulfillment.
My brother.
Fulfillment for Con Edison. I published a couple of newsletters for a while, one called Effective Investing, one called Effective Communication for writers, you know, showing them we're talking early 90s, you know. That
was when people still cared, that thought there might be a correct way to do something, and they wanted to know what it was.
and it was, you know, that was focused on you know, take this computer and start to use it as a tool. Don't you know, be afraid of the thing. You know, 91, 92, people, not everybody was using a computer yet, or a personal computer. So that was the orientation of that. But then in 96, then the other thing we got into big time was we've been involved with a local rescue mission for men with drug, alcohol, homeless issues. And we were producing their newsletter.
Well, we were producing all of their fundraising material.
Well, we started, I think, with the newsletter, and then
we did everything: appeal letters and newsletters.
Yeah.
And maintaining the whole their database and the donor database.
Right. Yeah.
That took a lot of time.
It was a big. So we did that for 5 years, and then the '96. I got an opportunity to buy this crazy military vehicles magazine for people that were restoring old historic military vehicles. And it was a magazine, but it was talking about, I guess, more of a glorified newsletter.
It was horrible.
Yeah, it was thicker, but it was really terrible. In fact, the editor or the publisher, whatever, the owner, he'd take the articles, however the writer would send them. If it was double space type, boom, that's what appeared in the magazine.
Save on typesetting.
Huh?
Yeah, he had zero typesetting expense.
Zero editing. He just took anything that came in, put it in, and ads the same way. I mean, half the ads were handwritten. Well, not half, but a significant number had corrections on them by hand. And, oh my gosh, so it's terrible. And I made it into a real magazine and built it up. At that point, the circulation was I think it had just been about 10,000, and we built it up, and we were pushing close to 20,000, and it was a real magazine. And I sold it to Krause Publications, and then they, which I did not realize at the time, they had, the owner, Chet Krause, had put the whole company up for sale, and he sold the company a year or two later to some other specialty magazine publisher. And I mean, we're talking a narrow niche. They published a lot of what they call whitetail bow hunting, and really narrow stuff up in northern Wisconsin. That's where they were based. So, in any event, he sold it. And the new publishers, I mean, their whole shtick was making money, and so they immediately raised the subscription price of military vehicles from, we were charging $18 a year, which was fine. They raised it to $21.95 or something, and they raised the advertising rates and everything else. And the last I knew, the circulation was back down around 10,000. It doesn't pay off to take that approach. Well, I didn't have the same emotional, whatever connection with that as I did with Creative Computing and the other magazines there. So it, fine. You do what you want with the magazine. It's okay. Nah. Anyway.
So, what do you guys do now? It seems like charity work and
Yeah, I run a nonprofit called Beyond the Walls. And he runs his website and does Bible studies.
Right. Well, actually, Betsy's the organization she has. She's the executive director of Beyond the Wall. I mean, that's gotten huge.
It's getting bigger and bigger.
It's gotten huge. What are you going to be?
Huge is probably an exaggeration.
Well, not huge like a Gates Foundation thing.
I wish.
But
we started in 2005 with 26 volunteers going to Guatemala to work with this organization that works with the people who scavenge in the Guatemala City garbage dump. The dump is in a ravine, and as it started in the early 50s, and as it has filled up around the edges, it kind of comes up to on the edge, and they put a couple layers of sand on it, let it sit for a bit, and then the people build houses on it, and out of scraps and things that they've made. And this organization called Potter's House that we work with has been working with them for 26 years. And they have an education program, micro-enterprise, health, and various things that they do. And since 2005, we've been sending volunteer teams. We're not the only ones, so sending volunteer teams down there to build houses and do health care and do stuff with kids. And so we started with 26. And this year, by the end of the year, we'll be well over 150 volunteers. We'll have 3 weeks this summer. I'll have 135 over 3 weeks this summer, and it started in our backyard. And one of the reasons that we wanted to start in the church, and we started the organization partially because it would be easier. It's easier to raise money from if you're not a church, and it's also easier to make the volunteer opportunities available to people. If you say, "Oh, I'm going to Guatemala," I'd love to go with you. Who's going? It's my church. But it's this nonprofit, this local nonprofit, it's more appealing, and we've really succeeded in doing that because we have people not only from outside of our church community, in our own community, but this year we're going to have a family from Oklahoma, about 6 families from Texas, and several people from Florida.
You got the Virginia.
It's like, oh my goodness, how is this happening? And
everyone goes out to Guatemala and does the.
Yeah, we all meet in Guatemala. I have 3 teams, one each week, and I'll be there the whole time, and they'll come down, and probably each team will build 2 or 3 houses. They'll do medical clinic. They'll do day camp for kids, soccer or baseball, sports things. A lot of teenagers, so they love to do everybody does construction in the morning, and then in the afternoon, people like teenage girls and some of the boys who want to do other stuff will help out with these other kid-related activities. So that's what I'm doing.
My wife is in Africa this week and last doing something similar.
Oh, cool.
Which is why I have to leave shortly to go get my kids.
What part of Africa is she in?
Nairobi.
That's.
She did some stuff with Special Olympics, and then they were helping build something at a food bank. Mm-hmm. And I don't really know that much yet because she's not home.
Yeah.
That's
cool.
Terrific.
Yeah.
She'll be changed.
Yeah.
Really.
She keeps telling me, she wished I could have come, and I do too. But
they got this kid.
Yeah, we got the 2 kids, and the 6-year-old doesn't feed herself reliably. So.
Right.
She can't drive to school.
Well, your annual budget has gone from 0 to what? You're going to hit about 150, 200,000 this year?
It's over 300 already.
Oh,
so.
Okay. 300.
Yeah, so it's and it's small potatoes compared to, say...
Yeah, but in
given that it's
7 years...
As my boss, the chairman of the board is, and I'm the only employee, is fond of saying, he says, these people out there don't realize that, we're just a bunch of schlumps sitting around a table making this stuff up as we go along. But, it's very good leadership. He's a very good leader, and...
So we were trying to maybe see if we could touch base with the Gates Foundation when we were up there. Of course,
we got a brochure into his hands.
We got a brochure and then some other stuff.
Was Bill Gates there?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I had a picture that I had taken of him at the first Altair convention in 1976. The first, before he had actually made the deal with Altair to develop BASIC. Well, he had said, I can do it, but, they hadn't signed the whole thing. And I got a picture of him as a 20-year-old, I guess, or thereabouts, talking at this little convention. Yeah, I gave him a copy of it. It's the problem I had is that I haven't. some people keep everything. I pretty much give everything away, and so when
You are lying. You keep everything.
well, I keep a lot of stuff, but
And then you give it away later.
yeah. Well, when I think it was Stan Freiberger was putting together the Fire in the Valley book, I gave him a lot of photographs, and I gave him the originals. And I think, and then the publisher said, "Well, it's not good enough, the photo, and you got the negative." Okay, yeah, they're gone, and never any of that came back. So. In fact, what I had to do is scan the photo from the book to make the print to give to Bill. But
The photos of being like young and cute.
That was his Woody Allen phase. He looked exactly like Woody Allen did at that phase in his life.
Yeah. Oh, yes. But
One in here too.
Oh, I'm sure there is.
It's a lot smaller.
yeah, she improves with age every year.
I saw the
a
picture.
little cuter.
You look the same.
Yeah. Anyway, but when the instant Paul Allen showed up, of course, everybody's mingling around this museum, and all of a sudden there was an arrowhead
There's a
over
sucking
into
sound.
that direction, and that wasn't even, and then Bill shows up, and oh my gosh, everybody has to.
Well, I was talking to Bob Barnett this morning, the guy who organized it, and he said, "Oh, well, Paul was very happy." He said Paul was, very pleased with the way the event went. He said his only regret was that, he and Bill didn't have enough time to spend with the people. And I'm thinking, well, okay, if you just stayed a little longer. Wasn't that big? Yeah, right, exactly.
Well, at least Paul Allen did come to the dinner.
Yeah, he stayed a little longer, but Bill, he was
Bill
in
was
and
there
out,
for
like-
maybe an hour.
He just showed up because he had to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
It was a
exactly.
cameo.
Yeah.
There's your cameo there.
Oh, yes. There I am. I was thinner then. That's the. Oh, look, and there's Ted in his hat. And Peter Fee. Who's that guy?
But there was a guy, Dick Heiser, was at the convention, and he had one of the hats, a Xanadu hat.
He was wearing one of those hats. The wings were actually silver.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, and there's Johnny Anderson. He's the one who wrote that crazy. And this is our building. The building that was.
That was the greenhouse garage building that we started.
And there was a whole. I believe it was you. Was it you or my brother that made a hole in the wall for an air conditioner? And
Your brother.
the building was painted white after.
Is that the air conditioner?
Probably.
Comments about the low-tech air conditioning there.
No, that one was in an actual window. This building had been painted white after, and there was right about here a hole had been made in the wall for this through the wall air conditioner. And when we was rented, and when we moved out, we had this hole in the wall. So my brother takes one of the ceiling panels, a spare ceiling panel that we had that was white, and he, sort of stuffed it in the hole and filled up so that it really didn't show anymore. We never heard any more about it.
Well, that building today is.
Yes, they've made it very fancy. They've made it fancy.
Oh my gosh! It's a boutique, shop, and it's really nice. So, and they didn't even tear it down. I mean, it wasn't a tear down and rebuild. They redid that. But in any event, we were not into spending money on facilities. Absolutely not. The last place that we were in was a printing company had owned it, and they had taken 3 sort of very small houses that backed up to railroad tracks, and then they built a large warehouse at the end that was relatively modern. And then they just connected the three houses with a little walkway. And so my office and Betsy and some of the others were up. We were in the first house, and then they had the art.
Well, you couldn't tell that it was.
Huh?
You couldn't tell that it was houses. By
No, but and then the art department was in the second, and the software group was in the third one, and then they had our fulfillment and storage and stuff in the
So
warehouse.
what did you spend money on there? That wasn't facilities.
Oh,
Not much.
well, we were spending money on expansion. I mean, grow. And then, okay, Ziff Davis comes in, and they say, oh, look at it, you got this wonderful warehouse. And
It's our warehouse now, right?
that's right.
Well, it wasn't though, because you owned it.
Huh?
It wasn't because you owned it.
Well,
remember?
I know, but in any event, they said, well, we're really going to use it, and we're moving some of your operations, advertising, sales, into New York. And so, therefore, you'll have more space. Well, it wasn't a trade-off of, the same kind of space or anything. But so what they did is they have all these other magazines at that point, things like Popular Boating and Yachting and everything else. And all of those magazines, they sold with, I shouldn't say sold, but when you subscribed, you got a premium. You got a tote bag or something.
Or a backpack or a cushion. Or
Yeah, and then, So they moved all of their premium fulfillment out to our warehouse. They said, well, because you're not going to have a software department anymore, so you won't have to ship any software, and so we're going to bring all of our premiums out there. Oh my gosh, we still have yachting bags, yachting magazine bags.
Speaking of fulfillment, that was something that we did. We were real pioneers in doing
That's
our
true.
own fulfillment.
Yeah.
Everybody, all magazines then used fulfillment houses, computer, and you would just send all the little cards and white mail and everything to your fulfillment house, and they would just take care of. They would enter it.
Reader service cards and
Yes,
Exactly,
everything.
and then they would
And everything went to either
labels.
Boulder, Colorado, Des Moines, Iowa, or someplace in Florida.
So when you say pioneers, does that mean you were cheap?
Well, but no, I think because we didn't like this, we were not getting good service, and we weren't happy with the service that the readers were getting, and so we decided to bring it in house, and we bought a program from a company in Boston that had written a program to run on a PDP-11, and we did. We brought the whole thing in house. We had our own data entry people. Did all the caging, taking the money out in house, and printed our own labels and shipped them. Because then you had to print them and ship them. There was no electronic delivery, and
Yeah, we were real pioneers
early.
there, and we did spend some money because it was an PDP 1170, not a low end, with the platter disc, 12-inch, I think it maybe 15-inch, but a big platter drive, and data entry terminal, deck writers, and VTO5. So that was, and when Ziff came in, I mean, they were blown away that we were doing our own fulfillment, and doing it very efficiently. We're doing and the other thing we were doing also was the reader service cards. We were doing all our own processing of that, the same computer, same system. Yeah, that was mini data systems. That's who it was.
what? No,
No. Okay.
Minidata was the one you were using.
Oh, that's right.
beforehand.
Yeah. Okay, that was because they had AIDS. But anyway, yeah. A couple of the questions you asked yesterday got us to thinking about, things that we probably should have mentioned or clarified.
Okay, let's go.
One is a correction. Betsy remembered better than I. That the embezzlement we were talking about actually was 79, not 78. Doesn't make a lot of difference, but it was, a year later. It was a year after I had left my day job, and I was really depending upon creative computing for my income and everything else, and to lose that was a big blow at that time. So that was I'm saying it was.
Think about that. That could have just put an end to things right there. Really.
Yes, absolutely could have.
It's 79, not 78, is what you're saying.
Well, that's what I said. It was 79, not 78.
I was going to ask you to move to be closer to the front of the
Do you actually want? I mean, I don't have to do this. My ego is completely uninvolved. I would go sit and play with the cats.
Please. You supplement Dave's memory, apparently.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, she's very good.
Stories, and absolutely.
One thing I thought it would be kind of worthwhile putting the whole thing, the whole era of the early computer magazines into a perspective of, in a sense, the personal computing itself went through several eras, and as it accelerated and just became so widespread, but it certainly didn't start that way. And you almost have to look at a period before there were personal computers, the pre-personal computer era, which I would say would be 1972 or so up through 75, when the first computers came out. And what was happening then is you had time-sharing systems, and big time-sharing systems, but then manufacturers like DEC and HP were making smaller time-sharing systems, 4 terminals on a computer. And people like Bob Albrecht, well, specifically Bob Albrecht, opened up People's Computer Company down in San Carlos, San Mateo, one of the Sans. It was an open to the public place, and he, what are people going to do with computers? Well, he wrote this book, What to Do After You Hit Return, of games, and I wrote my book not for his center, but for people in the East that had access to the same type of things on DEC computers, and those 2 books actually came out in 72, so that was well before. But so there was an impetus for people to use computers, even though it was mini computers and not, they didn't really have their own, but they did have access. So that, I think, was an important thing, because then when the kit computers first came out, which is 75, and we really had the kit computer era from 75 to around 78. I mean, that's when the primary was do it yourself, build it yourself. Well, who did those computers appeal to? Well, it was largely people that were okay with things like soldering guns, and that was largely ham radio people. I mean, that's where you look at 73 magazine and Radio Electronics. Those were the ones that dragged the hardware people into the field, and Popular Electronics, of course, with the Altair in January 75. But that was an era that wasn't where computers had, you had to know something about, and be a little bit capable with your hands to get into it. And that it sort of continued but dwindled off by 1980, because, of course, in 78, you had the 3 biggies, not biggies, but self-contained assembled computers, the Commodore PET, TRS-80, and the Apple, all came out in 78. But they were proprietary platforms. Nobody was sharing stuff. It wasn't actually, the S100 bus was more shareable, and more people, you got a card that you could plug into the S100 bus. So there was more. But on the other hand, you had to build it, and that was really a stumbling block for a lot of people. And then processor technology with the SOL. Okay, here's an S100 bus machine, but it's all built. Whoa, that was a big leap. So anyway, then you had the sort of what I call proprietary era from 78 to 82, and then it kind of dwindled off, although Apple certainly kept going. But when the IBM PC came out, 81, 82, 83, I mean, that ushered in the standardization era. Everybody, okay, we're going to make an IBM PC clone. And it was really only Apple and, to a lesser extent, Atari and Commodore that kept going with their own little
kind of
proprietary
for a while.
Stuff. But, they really couldn't keep going. At that time, we started working with Atari, and they using the same chip that Apple had. I thought, man, that's an opportunity. Why don't they just make an agreement with Apple to run Apple software and everything? And you got a 6502 and that family of chips in there. Why not? But, that wasn't Atari's way of doing things, as you well know. So in any event, they kind of went through those stages, and as a new one came along, the other one kind of died off. So you had, and that, though, then affected the magazines, because we, Creative Computing, we came from the pre-era, in a sense, from the educational applications and people having access to small mini computer time sharing systems, and then you said, oh, okay, when Altair Basic was announced, I mean, then it was the obvious thing that we would port over the programs to that. But other magazines, such as Byte and some of the hardware magazines, they really came from the ham radio end of things. Wayne Green, who started Byte, was publishing 73, which is the biggest magazine in ham radio. And so ham fests were one of the earliest places where computers were, these hardware, do-it-yourself computers were really seen and popularized. Wasn't until a little later that, we had computer festivals, but they were, the real early computer festivals in 75, 76 had a big overlap with ham radio people, and the early ones in New Jersey, and that was the earliest ones. It was, I think, not more, but at least half was oriented to ham radio, and then, it broadened out, of course, with more applications being reproduced. So anyway, I think it's kind of important to know how things fit into that whole scheme of things. So magazines either came from the ham radio and hardware side of things, and they had a different perspective than those like Creative Computing and, People's Computer Company. Bob Albrecht could have had a real winning magazine, but he was too much in the alternative mode. So People's Computer Company never really made it as a magazine. He didn't want to do advertising or anything that would give
that was a different magazine. That one it was more like a tabloid style newspaper.
Yes,
glossy. And
exactly.
It was
yeah.
It was had a very different feel.
Yeah. Again, magazine publishing. I remember early on, I was on a TV show, McNeil Lair Report, on public broadcasting, And Life magazine was being relaunched, and Time Warner was spending a ton of money on this relaunch. So they had the publisher of Life magazine, and of course
It was probably Time Life back then. I don't think
Time. Yeah, that's right. It wasn't Time. Although I think it was close to the time when they merged. Anyway, but yeah, it was Time Life. Then they had me. It's sort of the opposite extreme. They were going to spend more money on their first issue than our entire annual budget for everything. So, I mean, the difference in, big publishers, and because we were talking about that a little bit yesterday, was huge, really huge. The interesting thing is, there was a magazine back then, I don't know if it's still around today, called Folio, and it was a magazine for magazine publishers. And, they covered all aspects of it, subscription fulfillment and typesetting and everything else, and the business aspects of running a magazine. And they had some figures, and which were true for a long period of time, that 1 out of 7 magazine startups makes it for 1 year. 1 out of 7, that's low. And of those, 1 out of 7 makes it for 5 years. So we're talking about...
I think Wayne told me almost the exact same statistic.
Yeah, 1 out of 50 new magazines makes it for 5 years or more.
Right.
Once you make it 5 years, you're probably good to go for a while. And here's the new Life magazine comes back, roaring back in. Where are they today? Or even, 10 years later from that point. Gone. Didn't make it. So, in any event, yesterday we were talking a little bit about where did we put all our money? Mm-hmm. And, all our money wasn't an awful lot compared to big publishers. I mean, we were a small player. I mean, we're big in that field, but...
You're big fish in a little bowl.
Yeah. There wasn't a lot, and Betsy reminded me this morning, is one of the things that we did, and it's to in a sense, keep control, is we bought our own typesetting equipment. We
used, of course.
Huh?
Used,
yes. But we didn't want to send stuff out to a typesetter where, what did you call it?
Well, I mean, it was the same thing with the fulfillment. You were sending it to a service that gives your work to, a minimum wage person who, couldn't care less. Puts her time in and
plus you had stuff like code and things that needed to be done right.
Otherwise
it was useless.
Well, yeah, we didn't typeset the code usually. We would actually paste down the printouts. But we did. It was just part of it was for efficiency, and probably in the long run, it was cheaper. But just to turn your typesetting around, send it out and wait for your galleys to come back, and then you'd proofread them, and then you'd send it back, and then they'd make the corrections maybe, and you get it back again. So we said, well, we got this used CompuGraphic, was it? Mm-hmm. Typesetter and. Found a young woman who knew typesetting and hired her. We bought our own stat camera. We always used to have to send all the stats and vluxes out to be made. Mm-hmm. And so
that was huge camera. Then, before there was
had our own dark room.
Computerized publishing. Yeah, we had our own dark room and our own stat camera with the the thing that goes over a screen, basically, to make it into dots, and to do that, to make those negatives or vluxes, which is the positive. That was something, again, you sent it out and you got it back and you said, oh, you know what, we got a little more type here than we expected. We want to crop this picture. Well, you have to send it out again, and oh my gosh. So doing all of that in-house, but it cost money, in a sense, for the hardware and capital improvements that you needed to do that. So we were spending it on that, and expansion into other things like the software. And one of the others that I was thinking of that we did that certainly really didn't bring us any any tangible reward was that we were doing some consulting when we started developing software. We started doing consulting to places like the Exploratorium in San Francisco and Sesame Place. That was a big one for us, because Sesame Place was a theme park and right in our own backyard in New Jersey, and they were going to have these terminals that you could go up to, and one of the programs was mix and match the Muppets, and you could take different parts of the Muppets and combine them, and we wrote a part of that routine and a whole bunch of stuff that made computers and these things not computers but approachable things for kids. And we did some work for the Capitol Children's Museum in Washington and Franklin Institute in Philadelphia. And again, it was, did it help us? Maybe. Did we gain a little reputation? Maybe. But it, did it translate to the bottom line? Probably not. But as Betsy said, it was fun for you to do that, wasn't it?
It was fun. It gave him fun things to do.
Yeah. So anyway, that was one way that we in a sense spent some money.
Consultancy makes sense. I mean, you guys were the computer experts. Probably by orders of magnitude, and who are they going to go to?
Well, that's right. And interactive games. I mean, I already had a good selling book out there and was visible, known. So anyway, we did a lot of that kind of stuff, and that was, some of it was just kind of fun to do. Another place where we put, I won't say a lot of money, but we went to a lot of these shows. Well, there were some that were strictly personal computer shows, but then we also tried to push into things like the Consumer Electronics Show, where it wasn't, we were the only magazine at the computer and the Consumer Electronics. That's a huge show, twice a year, one in Chicago and one in Las Vegas. And we had, we would take the smallest booth that you could, but still it was a fair chunk of change to go to that. But that's where I felt we got to reach, and they were pushing at a lower level. That was video games mostly at that point. And although we weren't in that market, I just felt that was someplace that we wanted to be.
Do you think that was worthwhile?
I don't know. We were mainly looking for retail stores to sell the magazine. That was my main purpose of going there. No, it probably wasn't. Was probably not. And it cost us a lot of money to go to those shows. You have to experiment and, do those things. We started reporting on what, new developments at the Consumer Electronics Show. And there was some overlap with computing, but it was mostly video games. No, it wasn't. It didn't have a real good payoff. So. But then there was the Boston show that we went to where Betsy's feistiness really came out. You go to a show. I'm not talking about one of these local computer shows or something, but you go to a big show of, you got to use union labor. Okay, we had a computer at our booth. We wanted to plug it in. You're going to plug in your computer? Oh, no, you can't plug it in. You got to hire an electrician for an hour for $75 to plug in your computer.
That was a bit extreme. I don't believe that was actually true.
Well, I don't know how much it was, but you had to use union labor for a different thing. And Betsy took exception to that at one show, and actually came to blows with.
I was carrying stuff out off the show floor. We were trying to get out. It was in Boston. We were going to drive back, and we were trying to
go home at the end of the show.
At the end of the show. And so we were just carrying our cartons of leftover magazines and books off the show, And some union guy comes to me and starts telling me that, you can't do this, and he was being very rude. And so I punched him in the arm.
Yeah.
They were not happy.
Do you have to hire a special punching person to do that?
Yes, exactly. I did not. I should have consulted with the shop steward before I did that.
Now, there was a follow-up to that, which I'm not absolutely sure, but I think the guy that was running that show was Shelley Edelman. And so he then approached us, after that little incident. And said, you can't do this. And Betsy was really in his face about, come on, we're a tiny little nit, and sure we can do it. We can carry our own stuff. But anyway, Shelley Edelman, whose name you probably heard today, got his start by running these smaller shows around the country, and then he built up to running PC Expo in New York and Las Vegas, and then he got into, you run a show in Las Vegas, you've got to get, you make deals with the hotels and so on. And the earlier PC shows in Las Vegas did not use the convention center. They were held in one of the, I think probably the Hilton. So he got to know hotel people there, and then he started buying into hotels. And today Shelley Edelman is huge. He's not Caesars, but he owns one of the really big casino operations, and he's on Forbes list of top 100 wealthiest Americans, and
I'm sure he only uses union labor now.
I'm sure he does. Absolutely.
That's how he got where he is.
Yeah, but so we kind of crossed paths with some interesting people in different ways. There was another one I was thinking of. Actually, this is jumping around a little bit, but an editorial. You had different people submitting articles, and then some people I would ask, would you do something for us? Early on, and it was at a science fiction. Oh yeah, that's another thing we went to. I went to Comic Cons and the sci-fi cons to promote the magazine.
That was early.
Huh? That was early, very early. All right, I got to tell you one little incident there. There was I also went to small press, small press publisher conventions to get, and I went to one over Labor Day weekend, and I don't know what year it was. It was probably 75, 76 maybe, and the place that they gave this small press to exhibit was one platform up in the subway under Lincoln Center. So the Lincoln Center, of course, huge. But down one level is it's not shops. There may be a few shops, but it was a kind of a big open platform. Well, that's where we were exhibiting. And I had my magazines out there on a table, and and they were talking to these other underground publishers and so on. I mean, typical.
That's why they put you there.
Yes.
It's underground.
Underground, yes. And I said, you know what? It was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, maybe, or Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I said, I can't be here on Sunday. Talked to the person next to me. I said, I'm just going to leave a cigar box that said, put your money in the box. And he said, you're nuts. You're in the New York subway system. You're going to come back with nothing in your pocket. I left a bunch of change in it.
And your ex-wife said you were too trusting.
Yes. I left like 15 single dollar bills in there to make so people could make change. And I just left it there from Saturday to Monday. And I came back Monday. About $40, $50 in the box. I don't know whether it paid for everything that was taken, but it worked out fine. Yes, I was obviously too trusting, but at the same, roughly the same time, there was something going on, and it was not. I think it was a sci-fi convention or World Future Society. That was more. Yeah, it was World Future Society convention, and there was some. They had some notable people there, and I was sitting down with Alvin Toffler in the lobby of the Coliseum. And along comes over to us Isaac Asimov. So what a wonderful little time. We had some coffee in the Coliseum, and I said, Isaac, could you write me an article? Well, I got a good story from the iRobot series that hasn't been widely used or published, and you can use that. So I had an early contribution from Asimov, and Alvin Toffler wrote something for us. And anyway, so you got to know some interesting people at that point. And then who should submit an article? And then by this time, Betsy was the editor.
Over the transom comes an article from Michael Crichton. Really? It was a program. I can't remember what it was about. It was a program for the Apple. But it was something really dumb.
It was, I don't know if you remember, we were reminded with Harry Garland was at this thing up at in Seattle. And Harry Garland was one of the first ones to produce an independent manufacturer, produced a board, S100 bus board for the Altair. And this was really early. And he called it the TV Dazzler. And I mean, it was just made little squares light up, and you can make lots of them light up in different colors, or just a few. I mean, it was a silly program, but whoa, people said, well, you can do graphics on this, and that's he eventually developed it into quite an interesting graphics tool. I guess, because nobody would buy the TV. Well, people did buy the TV Dazzler for itself, but, the purpose was, hey, here's a board that you could produce graphics, do some graphics. So, in any event, that's essentially what Michael Crichton's program did for the Apple. You know what? That, not much.
Oh, this was not early.
Huh?
This was not early on. This was...
Yeah, it was after the Apple II was out.
But it was probably 1980, yeah.
So did you publish it?
No.
I rejected it.
And I think she's. I said, my God, we're going to reject an article from Michael Crichton.
Like Michael Crichton as an author.
Oh my gosh! But we did. We really had standards.
Later on, we did. Later on, he wrote something.
Wrote a nice.
Something. Well, it was better. It wasn't great, but he did write something better, and we did accept it.
I think Orson Scott Card wrote for Compute. I think. Mm-hmm. I don't know if he was Orson Scott Card yet at that point, but or just some schlub who was writing. Mm-hmm. But yeah. Who else? Yeah, but so we've crossed paths with some people.
Michael Crichton was actually very nice.
Yes, 6'8". Yeah. He's a big guy. He was. He was a very nice guy. Unfortunately, died.
But
on the other end of things, early on, we really were. And this is really probably even before Betsy got in. Kind of in the small press underground publishing movement as much as in the legitimate big magazine, because that's kind of where I started.
When I came, we had just published the first slick coated paper magazine on coated stock in September-October 78, I believe.
Yeah,
just published that, and that was the first of the one on coated stock. That was kind of the bridge to legitimacy.
Yeah, that was 2 years. So for the first 2 years, it was published on newsprint, and I had, a little tie-in with some of the small press people. I was learning about publishing from the Small Press Review, and got to know some of the people that were doing successful publishing. A lot of them were the magazines comics out of San Francisco, and so I got to know a little bit. R. Crumb and Gilbert Shelton and Sherry Flanagan and some of those early Bobby London. So anyway, I had one ad that we ran real early on was an adaptation of an ad that Robert Crumb did, and again, he said, "Yeah, you go ahead and use it. Change my thing to creative computing. Go for it." And Sherry Flanagan, she did a comic strip called Trots and Bonnie, and occasionally Trots was a little dog and Bonnie was a girl, and they occasionally got mixed up with this robot dog. So, all right, I published that. So,
was there some sort of falling out with that person?
With Sherry?
With Sherry.
No, Sherry. I'm still friends with her on Facebook. No, they had a major problem. She was involved with Gary Hallgren, and I forget who the publisher was. McNeil, Bobby London. Anyway, they were the Air Pirates Funnies group. That Disney took to task, and really, oh my gosh, that caused the death of a lot of the publishing in the underground comics movement.
Okay, I don't know what happened.
Okay, well, Air Pirates Funny. That was. They were just looking for trouble with that. They had Disney characters, flying planes and getting into all kinds of trouble that Disney characters never would have done. Sexual problems as well as just acting badly. And so Disney just said we can't put up with this, and it was an interesting case because was it copyright violation? Not really. They weren't using. They were Disney lookalikes, but they weren't calling them Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck. They just looked the same or very similar, and so. But it was a landmark case in the underground comics movement, and it really caused a lot of them to then pull back a lot on the satire and stuff that they were publishing.
A number of years, I asked about Sherry because a number of years ago when I had first put the best of creative computing books on my website, they were up for a while, and then I got an email saying just like, you have to take this Trots and Bonnie pages down there. I own copyright, just like waving arms and just like okay, so I took it down, but it was just like, I don't know, I thought maybe it wasn't.
Well, the whole copyright trademark thing is there's interpretations that go from really, really strict to, some people, everything that goes on the internet is in the public domain. Well, that's not really true either. But are you making money from a copyrighted material? If you are, okay, that's a pretty clear violation. Are you affecting the copyright owner's ability to make money with it? Okay, that's a violation. But then there's and I'm kind of in this right now with Ergay and Tintin. They have, or those books have inspired a lot of people to make parodies and fake Tintin covers, Tintin at the beach and Tintin, places that Tintin wouldn't normally go. Well, is it affecting the sales of Tintin books, or is it actually increasing them? And Casterman, who owns and Moulinart own the Tintin copyrights. They're really going after some of these people, but I'm not sure that they have a very good case. And so some people are taking everything off, nothing on the website, and others are saying, hey, this is legitimate. And I happen to, well, I have collected a lot of those covers, and I'm going to, I think, put them up on our website, and so
I guess you'll find out soon enough.
I'll find out soon enough.
They may not be in the right legally, but how hard do you want to fight it? And then once
Yeah, well, I'm
it's
not,
coming out,
you know, but I think they have to demonstrate that it's hurting them in some way. One last thing, and is that sparked from one question you asked yesterday, and that is where, again, back to the money issue, where does money go? Well, when I sold the magazine, right at that time, I took 15% of what I received, donated to charities. I have, in a sense, signed on, although not as an official signee, to the Gates Buffett initiative to give away half of my, my wealth while I'm alive. Already, well, of course, at what point in time do you compute that? I have already given away more than I received for creative computing to charity. Of course, it's grown a little bit and made reasonably decent investments, and so it continues to grow. But I'm really committed to doing that, and so my kids aren't going to inherit it all, and that's just the way it is. The way I believe. Good. Put my money where my heart is. Anyway.
I have a question for you, Betsy. You said something yesterday that I should have followed up on. You said something about stealing BASIC.
Well, there was a big thing about there was this big thing just night before last at this dinner that we went to, where all of these people who had been at this MITS. The first MITS conference, and they referred to the letter that Bill Gates wrote. And,
why are you stealing my software?
Well, exactly. That was just a reference to the Bill Gates, which had just been brought back to my memory by that. People were telling stories at this, instead of having an after-dinner speaker, they were just passing the mic around and, people talking about incidents and things from the past, but that was just the...
Did you guys tell a story to this group of...
Not really.
Not much.
I just followed up on something Nolan Bushnell said. Actually,
some of the stories were really boring.
Oh yeah, long and boring. Yeah. It's an interesting thing though about BASIC itself, that because it I shouldn't say because, but it was developed at an educational institution originally by Kemeny and Kurtz at Dartmouth, and they either deliberately or because they had gotten a lot of grant money from General Electric and the early time-sharing systems, they basically let anybody use their BASIC. So it was developed at Dartmouth, but if GE and then later GE Honeywell put a system in at Minnesota or Florida or someplace else, they could use BASIC. They could have it, no license fee or anything. So obviously that made BASIC, a universal language. It was available, or at least that particular version of BASIC. Well, then if you write a different version of BASIC, where does that fall? Is there some sort of violation? Do you need some permission? Right. And basically Kemeny and Kurtz said, no, you don't.
Love black cats. Come here, baby.
And they allowed
Hello, Voxel.
BASIC to be used, to be developed by others. Digital equipment at the same time, actually, maybe it was even earlier, but roughly the same time, had developed also an interactive language called Focal. And Focal, in many regards, was more efficient than BASIC because they were running it on mini computers, and there was less memory to work with. On the other hand, and this is true of digital, as time went on, they said, no, nobody else can use Focal. We're not going to let, especially those people at Data General, but any place else, nobody could use Focal. And I think that it wound up with a situation in a sense like Sony and Betamax. Sony saying, oh, Betamax is ours, and it's a better format than VHS, which it definitely was, but then JVC saying, well, we got VHS, and okay, Toshiba, what, you want to use it? Fine. We'll license it to you for next to nothing.
Do you think Focal could have been BASIC?
I think it could have been very big. I think there could have been some very serious competition between the two languages. But by digital limiting it only to their own computers and specifically to their mini computers, not even the big mainframes, it really limited the spread of Focal. And in fact, it forced me at DEC to go out to the developers and people in educational institutions. They wanted BASIC. There were a few schools and colleges in the Boston area near DEC that, where they were okay with Focal. But, stuff was getting published by Minnesota Educational Computer Consortium and others in BASIC, so at Huntington Computer Project. So they wanted BASIC. So I had to go out. I hired one group, actually it turned out to be just an individual guy in Brooklyn, to develop a BASIC for a 4K PDP-8. Well, a BASIC took 3.5K. It gave you 500 words, 512-bit, not even, the 16-bit, then you'd at least get 2 bytes per. Right. But 500 words to write programs wasn't much. And that's forced the, that's when I wrote Lunar Lander and Hammurabi and some of those programs. Actually, some of them I ported over from Focal into BASIC. And then we had a machine that had 8K. We had a different version of BASIC. And then, of course, because Hewlett-Packard had a machine that read cards, Mark Sense cards, we had to have a version of BASIC for that. And then we had a timeshare BASIC. Oh my gosh, we had 6 versions of BASIC. Well, 5 actually on the PDP-8 family. It was absurd. It was crazy. But well, we had to do it.
So I was going to ask you kind of the process of you started saying, you interrupted yourself earlier. You said people would submit articles and then, I don't know what you're going to say next, but it reminded me that I wanted to ask you kind of just the process of how the magazine got made. You got an article, I assume it was typed up or something, and... Oh,
you mean the mechanics of the production?
Yeah.
Yeah, we would receive most of our... the articles in the magazine came in over the transom. Mm-hmm. And we would get these articles, and our editorial assistant would log them in and pass them around to the editorial staff, John Anderson and Russ Lockwood and
Peter Fee.
What does that mean, over the transom?
It means that they were unsolicited. And somebody in the middle of the night dumped them over or through the mailbox. And they put a little piece of paper on there, and the guys would write their opinions.
Betsy was
we were talking last night about some of the things that they said.
Like what? What would they say?
We would never.
Don't quit your day job.
Well, and then they had the rubber stamp.
Somebody found a stamp And we've got everything that we had was used, including our desks and everything. And somebody found in the back of a desk a stamp that said San Marcos on it. And this was like the ultimate insult. They stamped San Marcos, like, get it out of here.
Send it to San Marcos.
Send it to San Marcos, wherever that was.
Right.
And and so ultimately, I would make the final decision whether we were going to publish this or not. I mean, once we were well established, the vast majority of them, went back. I mean, they didn't. We never returned manuscripts, but and they would come with piles of code, and because a lot of them were programs, and just and then we would decide, and then it was the editorial assistant's job to notify the person, mm-hmm. And we bought all rights, didn't we? Mm-hmm. Or North American serial rights was what we bought for everything, and then they would go into a queue, and sometimes we'd say something. Oh wow, this is going to go really well with this education issue that we're going to be doing in June, so we'll slate that one for June, or just put it in the queue and we'll see when it rises to the top or whatever. And then the more technical editors like John Anderson, he was our best guy ever. They would go through the code and make sure that the code worked, and I would edit them for content and correct
for English, for grammar.
Exactly. With a pen and pencil, and then they would go to our typesetter. Typesetter would correct them, and then they would come back, and I think that probably one of the lower level editorial assistants or something would proofread them, but I proofread a lot of them too. And then they would be, when they came out of the typesetter, it was on a smooth, shiny, paper. And the
photographic type paper.
Yeah, and again, if they had screenshots or photographs or anything, the art department would make them into photostats or VLUXs, and then when it was time for it to go to press, they would put them on boards, pieces of cardboard, white paper.
Like paste up?
Yeah, and they do the paste up, put it all on there.
And the boards all had, there's a non-reproducing blue, when it's photographed.
For the borders.
They had different, outlines, blue defined columns, both 2 and 3 column pages, and upper limits, and where page numbers can go, and all of that kind of stuff.
The way we were still doing it in the college newspaper in 1990.
Right. Well, that's exactly So what we're talking about, and and then once you get it all together, and then again, somebody's got to read it to make sure that there's no lines left out, particularly on the programs. Make sure that those all still make sense. Which, and there were many cases where a line got left out, or, the artist is, cuts off the thing and realizes, I meant to cut it shorter, and then that little line disappears, and then you send it off to be printed, and all of the subscribers, get all upset because Star Trek doesn't run. And
so did that sort of thing happen infrequently or often, or
with typeset material, not much at all. But with program listings were really tough, because you would have people that submit something, and they'd have a real cheap low-end dot matrix printer, And we would, we always encourage people, you're going to submit a program, submit it in some machine-readable form. So we don't want to type them all in to make sure they work, even though our readers are going to have to, but we don't have to do that. So send us, but even so, we might then print it off on one of our slightly higher end printers. But I'll tell you what, you got page breaks and everything else, and the art department didn't have a clue what they're, about programs and stuff. So, and a program would get statted down. I mean, we weren't using the full-size type of program listings.
At that point we had the ability to make them fit.
Mm-hmm. And so that's where the most common place that you lose a line or something. It gets photographed, a page, a line list, and when it's coming out of a line printer, you might have 1 or 2 lines on the following page, and we forgot that.
Well, personally, I loved. I don't know. It said so much about the magazine that when it continued, there would just sometimes just be like a handwritten arrow going, continued over here.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
It was just
that was early.
Yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't professional, and that was awesome. It was just like, okay, it was.
Yeah.
It seemed like you were just.
And then we would request when we would solicit articles, like if there's a new Apple peripheral that we wanted to review, we'd get the product, and then a lot of times our own guys wanted to review the stuff, but if it was something that we didn't have time for or that was better suited to one of our freelancers, we would ask them, and send it out and ask for a review of it. And a lot of reviews came in over the transom too, but we tried to be careful of those, that they were not either trying to justify their own purchase of whatever it was, or get even with the the publisher for producing a
or written by the
that really wasn't an issue at the time. It was a more innocent time. That really didn't happen much, but it was just sometimes people would get a product that they didn't care for, and totally bash it. And then we got to go back and figure out, is it really that bad? And we tended not to produce seriously negative. We didn't. If it was a really bad product, we just ignored it.
We tried to be objective with reviews, but before I got into the computer field at all, I was in market research, and there are a number of biases that really overwhelmingly affect all kinds of market research polls and surveys. One is that people think they're better than they are. For example, we used to put on if we're doing a poll or a research study, we'd put a question on, basically designed to show the executives who were using this data that there were some biases. And
he's not talking about creative computing. He's talking
about this was way earlier.
Okay.
Talking about Procter & Gamble products or General Foods or that kind of thing. Anyway, the question that we put on was, please rank your driving ability. And we had, from well below average or accident waiting to happen up to, today it would be Mario Andretti, Danica Patrick, and them out there. And you know what? 99% of the population ranked themselves better than average. Well, where is your average then?
Right.
It's way high. The other thing, equally pervasive in a sense, is that people wanted to justify a purchase decision. In fact, back in the 30s, the slogan for Ford Motor Company was, ask a man that owns one. You ask a man that owns and has made the decision to buy this car, he's going to say, yeah, it's the greatest car. And so you put on questions, again, throwaway questions, but if you had this, or if you are an owner of whatever car it is that you have, what do you have now? Would you buy another one? Well, people, oh yes, this is a great decision. I love this car. Well, I'll tell you where it goes, where you can find out is you look at, okay, what percentage of people that did own that particular car did buy another one? And they're always way lower than those that say they would buy another one. It gets more pronounced with higher prices. If you've made a decision to buy a high-priced car, you're going to say, oh yeah, man, I'll tell you what, this Land Rover was the best car I ever bought, and 78% of the people might say, oh, I'm going to buy another one, and you know what? About 15% of the people actually do.
So this gets back to the magazine because people want to justify it in a review.
Right.
That's exactly right, yeah. And as Betsy said, it could go the other way too. I think that I'm getting screwed here with this product, and I'm going to knock it. So when you get reviews, in a sense, over the transom, they're either justifying this was really wonderful, I made a great decision buying this particular product, or I hate it, and it's hard to get or know whether the review was really objective and realistic. So,
did you ever get pushback from advertisers?
All the time.
All the time.
Demanding a good review? Okay, tell me.
Well, what we would get we would feel the pushback from our ad salespeople.
Mm-hmm.
They would say, well, so and so is annoyed with you because you didn't put and so we very rarely put totally negative reviews, but we tried to be objective, and not every product is perfect, so almost every product is going to have some negative feature, and so we would put those in, and the advertisers would then go to their ad rep and complain, and then the ad rep would come to us and say, well, why are you doing this? These people are mad, I have to sell them ads, and
right.
And we would just say, separation of church and state.
Yeah.
You are advertising in this magazine because it's a credible magazine, and if we let you push us around, it won't be credible anymore, and and then we'll reflect on your ad.
Do you remember anyone ever pulling ads because of it?
I don't offhand. Do you?
No, but I can tell you the opposite. There were a couple of magazines that basically almost ran manufacturer press releases as product reviews. And they did get more advertising than we did from some manufacturers that like that. I hate to, name names, but Compute magazine was very much in the. I don't think you'll find any negative reviews in Compute magazine. Everything was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Personal computing, similar, very positive. Wow. Gee whiz reviews on almost all of the things that they saw. It just isn't that way.
So I want to talk about, we've talked a lot about creative, I want to talk briefly at least about the other magazines. Sync, the one about the Timex Sinclair. Now, I understand the allure of publishing a magazine geared to a specific system, but why did you pick Timex Sinclair?
Well, probably two reasons. One is that I had we had more of a presence in England than most of the other magazines. We had an very early agreement with David Tebbutt, who was the co-publisher of, what was it called? Personal Computer something or other.
I was hoping you would read
it. Was like Personal Computer, it might have been Personal Computer World. Yes, it was.
Yes, it was Personal Computer World, and then PC, then when PC World started, they had to call it PC World because there was already a personal computer world in England.
And we had an agreement that they could reprint material from Creative Computing and give us credit, which they did for a while, but then they developed their own enough in-house capability, and there was enough differences. But we went to England, and I very early on had an agent in England that we could take subscription.
A housewife who kept the back issues in her spare bathroom.
And yeah, we still know her, Hazel Greaves, Hazy. Anyway, so we were getting enough subscriptions from England that we were sending over. I don't know how they package them up, but what they call M-box or M-bags, mail bag basically of magazines, and then mailed them from England. So in any event, I had more of a connection with the British market than probably any of the other magazines. Well, definitely did. And so I got to know Clive Sinclair and what was going on over there. And then when they said, well, he's going to bring over the computer to this country, and Timex, I mean, my gosh, they're a big outfit. They're going to market it. So it looked like, and by that time, there was no point in starting a Commodore magazine or an Atari magazine. They already, or Apple, they already existed. Yeah. So I thought, well, maybe this is going to be the next big one. We'll be right there when they start, and we were. And Timex actually put what we have, a little sample of Sync or something, but it was in the package with the computer.
Oh, okay.
So that was one way of getting a subscriber base, and because you couldn't possibly afford to advertise and do direct mailings for a magazine like that. But they were, in a sense, helping us get it going.
Okay.
So that's why. It was pretty successful, actually. I mean, we were making money on that magazine, mainly because we didn't have to promote it. If we had to get subscriptions, we could not possibly have, made it work. There wasn't enough advertising, though. I mean, it really, I don't know what the ratio was, but it wasn't as good as we would have liked it. And the magazine would have had to be, tiny if we'd maintained the same advertising to edit ratio that we would have liked. So, but we didn't lose money on it, but we didn't make anything on it either. I think it was a break-even proposition.
Okay. Microsystems. I don't think I know anything about it, but it was in the list.
Tell them about Sol.
No, this is your time.
Microsystems was, I said there was a lot of early development in New Jersey. Mm-hmm. And there was a guy named Sol Libes, Libes. You won't find him probably on
Google him.
Who was the first president of the Amateur Computer Group in New Jersey. He was a professor at Trenton State College. And he felt that Byte magazine started out fine, but then they were, focusing more on assembled hardware and things that were already made. And so he wanted to get down at the real lower level of do-it-yourself, build-it-yourself. So it was... Microsystems was more like Byte was in the very beginning, with publishing, circuit diagrams with logic and transistors. Well, not transistors, but PCs and everything.
Well, its first name was S100 Microsystems.
S100, yeah,
it was S100 bus.
Just for the S100 bus, and then it became Microsystems in '78 or '79 when some of the others came out. They started covering the 6800 and 68000 chips from Motorola, but it was a real techie magazine, and it was one that I think Ziff probably killed that one off.
I think it was dead before
early on. Yeah, it might have been. I don't know, but it was.
The S100 bus did not survive into the 80s.
Well, that's what I was saying before. Is there were these eras, and the do-it-yourself S100 era. I mean, that was 75 to 78, and then it kind of had a downward spiral of 2 or 3 years, and it was gone. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it wasn't gone, but it wasn't the same. And so Microsystems was tuned into that, and they were running hardcore stuff. And the reason that Saul, or that we reached an agreement with him to publish it, is basically he didn't have any real magazine background, and thought we could, we could do something with it. It turned out not to be a good fit, but we published it for a while. I don't know if we made money or lost money on that. Probably didn't make anything.
Small business computers. Or computing.
What?
Small business computers? Who did we buy that from? I can't even remember. You can't even remember that we had it. I can tell by the look on your face.
No, man.
That's the one that my brother was a publisher, remember?
Yeah, I know, but I don't know where we got it.
Did that just fold into creative, or?
Eventually, but that we published it for a while. I think it was something that somebody basically left on our doorstep.
Yeah.
I think it was kind of like,
I thought it came with your brother.
A puppy on the... No, because my brother wasn't doing publishing until after
that was one
college.
that sounded like a good idea at the time, but
I think we saw a future in business computing.
Yeah, we did, and unfortunately, that was one where Ziff Davis wanted, what I mentioned yesterday, that they wanted to really shift the focus of creative computing away from the home market, or broaden out from the home market, shift it into the small business market. It just didn't. Well, I don't know. It was an uncomfortable fit. It would have been better to have a separate magazine.
No, I don't remember where we got small business computing from or where it went.
I don't either.
But I know, obviously it wasn't a huge acquisition.
Right. So it's a footnote in the story.
A footnote in the story.
Actually, a bigger acquisition was earlier, and that was ROM magazine. ROM was published by who?
Eric Sandberg Diamond.
Right.
Diment.
Connecticut. And he did a nice job with the magazine, very nice job with it. Published 9 issues, and a little different focus than creative, but it really overlapped us very nicely because he had more graphics stuff, and in fact, it was through him that I got to know George Baker and some of the people up there. The other guy that did the pixelated blocks photos. You've seen those
the
photos
Einstein.
of Lincoln with block pics. Ed. Don't remember his last name. Okay, he and George Baker sort of came as a package not with ROM, but they knew of each other. But we actually, for I would say 4 or 5 issues, ran ROM as a whole separate section, and even said it on the cover: Creative Computing and ROM. And then it became evident.
I think that was because he had a whole lot of editorial kicking around.
Yeah, that
we
could
bought.
be. And then we just merged it in completely. But that was a very good fit, and it brought us more editorial than it did subscribers, because they did not have a big subscriber base. But it was a nice marriage in a sense. Okay, got you off your track.
Video and arcade games. So we published, I think, 4 issues.
3.
Three?
Actually, 3, but if you got a hold of the third one, you're doing well, because it was not widely. I think Ziff cut that off after two real issues got mailed out, and we did a third one, but it didn't. It wasn't sent out to subscribers.
My website only has 2 issues.
Yeah, well, there's only 2 that really were distributed.
Now I have
A goal.
Yeah, if you can get a hold of the third one. I don't even have that. It's the same thing on Atari, and there were 3 issues of Atari, and I did not keep an issue of the third issue. Oh, man, shoot me. But video and arcade games, I mean, there were at least 5 or 6 other magazines focusing on that. We said, hey, talk about magazines that were running non-objective manufacturer-provided reviews. All the others were. And I maybe convinced myself and some people at Ziff Davis that there was a need for really objective
Ziff? Did
reviews.
Ziff do that? Were we with Ziff when we did
Oh,
that?
yeah, that was a late one. And so we said, let's...
1983.
Yeah.
that was definitely... let's do it. And... but again...
Not only that, but it was going to be fun.
It was going to be a lot of fun.
So why did it fail?
Okay, again, you got to look at the eras of what was happening. Arcade games then really were on the decline. Video arcades where you go and put a top a quarter in, because there was so much more capability in the home computers and the Coleco and the Mattel and the different home systems. They could do not as much, but you could get a pretty darn good game and that you could take home with you and not have to pop a quarter in the slot every time you played. So arcade games were kind of on the downward spiral. So that eliminated a lot of potential advertising. We weren't going to get any advertising from Namco and all of the producers of the arcade games, which was hey, it's advertising along with the other home producers of the games. Hey, there were 4 or 5 magazines already that they were pouring money into. They didn't, really want another one.
Right.
So it was advertising just lack of advertising that killed that off. We just couldn't get it. I think there was still a need for what we had sort of, in a sense, proposed to do, of objectively reviewing games, and secondly, we were telling people how to play them.
It was strategies.
That's strategies. But it was advertising that we just couldn't get.
Okay. I have Atari Explorer and Atarian, which I think we covered pretty well. Military vehicles, which we talked about.
Yes.
So the other magazines, Byte and Kilobog, was it rivalry? Was it friendly competition?
Byte was we were in bed together, not in bed together, but we published the best of Byte. Creative Computing did.
Yeah, for a while.
Well, just one.
No, but I wasn't that friendly a rival. I mean, it wasn't that friendly after a while.
It wasn't friendly once they got, once they sold to McGraw-Hill, and they sold early. Then everything was off. But we did some joint promotions with Byte for hardware, creative Software. We ran ads for each other for a short time.
That's what McGraw-Hill cut off.
Oh, yeah.
In a heartbeat. No more of that.
But we felt that we weren't even competing for the same advertisers. Just a few, but not really. And certainly, we were not in direct competition at all with Byte. So that was just kind of, we're going the same place. And you're going on a hardware direction. We're going on software. Whereas, well, when Wayne Green, through this intrigue with his wife and everything else, lost Byte magazine, I mean, he was fit to be tied. And I'm going to kill him. And then he started Kilobyte. It wasn't Kilobot, it was Kilobyte.
Yeah.
For I don't know how many issues.
Not many.
1,000 bytes and a Kilobyte. I mean, it had dual meaning there.
Yeah.
And that was a ferocious and very nasty, horrible rivalry. And then I don't know who, somebody early on forced him not to use the name Byte at all.
Sure was Byte.
Yeah. So they changed it to Kilobaud.
Which didn't mean anything.
That didn't mean anything. No.
So did you have a relationship with Wayne, or?
Nobody had a relationship with.
Nobody really had a relation. I knew him, of course. But he was going his own way. Now, the one area actually where we got into more competition with him than in the magazine itself, because again, he was trying to be like Byte, hardware oriented, and coming out as he published 73 magazines, so he was basically focusing on the ham radio people, the do-it-yourselfers, and so on. But they started a software division that was pretty good. They had a lot of the same types of software that we did on cassette tape, and so in any event, we really had more of a head-to-head rivalry on the software than in the magazine publishing. But we never really had anything to do with them on the magazine products or books. They also published some books, but more, like the magazine, hardware type of things. But we weren't quite as, I don't know if I should say selective, but our book publishing, we did get into things that weren't in the magazine. We published books with more of a hardware orientation, and we had a little broader line of books than the type of things that we'd have in the magazines, which is.
I don't know if you want to open this can of worms, but you said to me in an email, you couldn't find two people whose vision, philosophy, ethics, and view of business and life is further apart than Wayne and I. Can you elaborate on that?
He was just basically unpleasant. It's my take on him. I didn't know him that well, but I mean, it was just sort of like he had a chip on his shoulder and was daring you to knock it off, wouldn't you say? I mean,
yes.
You knew him before I did, but by the time I arrived on the scene, that was just sort of the general industry perception of him, I think, was just, stay away from him, leave him alone. He's not very nice.
Well, one other thing which we've sort of touched on a couple of times that I'm very trusting, overly so according to my ex-wife, and to give you a couple of examples. Wayne you walk out of that door, boy, out of sight, you're going to do something to screw him, is what his view would be. He did not trust anybody. And
least of all his ex-wife.
Least of all, yeah. But I mean, he really, it's the old saying, just because you're paranoid or whatever it is, doesn't mean that somebody isn't out to get you. But he thought everybody was out to get him. Everybody. And so we're totally philosophically different. Our ways of doing business were different. I mean, I shake hands with you. We have an agreement. You don't shake hands with Wayne.
Well, I mean, I don't think his employees were never happy either.
Oh.
You talk to them at shows, and he didn't have like a great
rapport.
Well, it was not, the culture and his organization, I don't think was particular. I think it was probably permeated with this lack of trust.
Yeah, that was one thing. We had fun. We really did have fun at Creative Computing. Perhaps some of the editorial staff too much.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, there was one point where Betsy had to take away their.
But they were all young guys, and some of them even still in high school, and they would play games for hours and hours and hours, and long after the reviews were done. So there was one, it was like a little self-contained thing that played football, and man, they played that for hours. So I had to take it away from them. Don't make me be your mother.
Yeah.
Was there any drug culture at all? I mean, like if you read stories of Atari and stuff, I mean, if you're a programmer at Atari, there was cocaine and pot every day, and hot tub parties.
Not that we knew of.
The East Coast was quite different than the West Coast.
No, there was nothing that we. No, I don't think so. In fact, there was John Anderson and Peter Fee. They were actually kind of protective of me in a lot of ways. And I can remember being in John's office, and I don't know whether they were talking about a movie or something like that. And Peter and John were talking about the movie, and and John said, he said, no, you wouldn't like this movie. Don't go to this movie. That kind of thing. They were all, and they were funny guys. Oh my goodness. Just get laughing and.
Lubar.
David Lubar, yeah. I mean,
guy named David Lubar.
They were free spirits, but they were very funny, talented guys.
Yes. He has come out with a line of children's books. Mm-hmm. Weird stuff. What was the last one? Something about the lawnmower weenies. And but he has a line of 6 or 8. And they're all little short stories, and some of them were adaptations of stuff that almost got published in Creative Computing. Probably some of them did. But Lou Barr is a funny guy. He went when he left. He went to work for one of the video gaming companies, and his first big successful game was Worm Wars. And Worm Wars. Other people were fighting with real serious warriors. He's fighting with worms. So anyway, we just had a different kind of culture. It was just one where we had a lot of fun.
When John Anderson went to work for Ziff Out, didn't he go to work for A+?
Mm-hmm.
In San Francisco, and he was one of the 5 people killed in the San Francisco earthquake of 1986. He was in a car, and a piece of a building fell on their car. He was a really funny guy.
Yeah, but we had a different. We did not have a serious business culture.
No, we had this great big room with tables set up around the edges and in the middle, and it was kind of like that, only nowhere near as neat.
I cleaned that up for you.
But just tangles of wires, and we had to have one of every computer so we could test all the software, and then this one would be running this kind of peripheral, and it was like a young guy's dream job.
Yeah. And Yeah, well, you commented yesterday about we had as a bunch of high school students, not quite, but still had
I
that.
said that they were in their early 20s, but they basically, they had the maturity of high school students. A lot of them. So they needed a little mothering, but I wasn't that old myself. But they were, then they were just really nice guys. We did a good job hiring those guys.
But you're talking about the Atari culture and some of the others, and where every Friday I know some of these companies had parties and that kind of thing. We had an annual party, but picnic or whatever. But it was we didn't need weekly parties and stuff to let you in, because guys were doing it every day. Not really partying, but playing the games and bantering and everything else. So, as they say, it wasn't a real efficient business culture. Heck, I had worked for Digital Equipment, and, which was still a pretty relaxed place. But AT&T, which was anything but, and I mean, this was as far away from that kind of corporate culture as you could get. But it worked. It didn't make a lot of money, but it worked.
You guys had fun. That's important.
Yeah, and I think that they appreciated it, because they weren't making tons of money either, but they had a lot of fun. They enjoyed going to work. And
do you read computer magazines now, or not even read, but are you familiar with?
Are there any?
Who
They're
has
very different than creative.
somebody? Well, and it wasn't you. Somebody, I think, out there said, "What do you read today?" And the only magazines that I'll occasionally pick up in the computer field are mostly from England, Internet Magazine, and there are several, which is sort of interesting that the dominant internet magazines today should come from England, but they do. If I want to do something, and I haven't lately, but where I wanted to get into doing something different or interactive or something with my website, I'd pick up one of those magazines, and they'd kind of have the same kind of thing that Creative used to publish. Here's the code to do it, or in Perl, or HTML or whatever. I converted all of my website some time ago, actually quite a while ago now, to XHTML from old HTML. And I did not like any of the programs that generate web pages, mainly because, and today it's probably okay, but I felt that earlier on they were very, in a sense, inefficient. You'd have this much code for something in XHTML, you could write in 5 lines, and just it's my old-fashioned nature to say, the interpreter or compiler or whatever has to go through all of that just to pick out, what's going to be displayed. So my web pages are very compact and short. They're all XHTML and none of this extra garbage and style pages and everything else. Anyway, so that's what I'll pick up a magazine for. I was doing a little bit of programming in Perl. And then I decided, no, you know what, I can get routines that I can download, and I don't have to learn it myself. I learned enough to know that I don't want to be a Perl programmer. Or what's the other one? I don't know. There was another one. But I'm right at the point now of wanting to do some more things that I can't, and so I'll probably buy some more computer magazines to learn about them.
Has anyone talked to you about the purchase of PC by Ziff Davis?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is a good story.
Yeah. All right.
She was involved.
I was involved. There was a magazine called PC out here. I was in San Francisco.
Just PC Magazine.
PC Magazine, right? Always. And there was a guy named Tony Gold, and there was somebody else who I can't remember. There was Tony Gold and this Mr. X started this magazine, and they hired, and David Bennell will probably tell you the real, I don't know all the details of it, but I'm sure he has them engraved in his brain. Hired David Bennell to run it, and I guess several other people, and they were, my understanding is that they told them, we're going to give you a piece of the action, we're not going to pay you very much, but you're all part owners and everything, but nobody ever wrote it down. Mm-hmm. So then when Ziff Davis approached Tony Gold and Mr. X they wanted to buy the magazine, and the guys said, oh yeah, sure, and they sold it to him. And all these people who were working for him said, well, what about us? We're part owners too. But there was no proof of it. And so Ziff bought it, and they were right in the middle. They were just about to go to press with an issue. And they got word that it had been purchased by Ziff. So David Bennell took just about the entire staff, and they walked out and went across town and started PC World. And apparently, their lawyers said, don't take anything with you. Mm-hmm. So they just walked out, left the offices as they were. The only thing that and then Ziff, who now had a magazine to get out and no one to do it, sent me out to the West to San Francisco for a couple weeks. And there was like an editorial assistant and a couple of freelance writers were the only people left. And so I had to figure out.
This is when you became the interim editor?
That's when I became the editorial director, mm-hmm. they called me, of PC. And they, so I basically went out there, walked into this office and had to pull together their issue and get it off to the printer. And the only thing that they did was they had a big dummy on the wall of, where everything...
The layout of all pages.
The layout of the imposition, where all the pages were going to go and all the stories, and they moved everything around. They couldn't resist. But,
that's kind of awesome.
Yeah, oh my.
So this one guy whose name I wish I could remember, Barry Owen, worked with me, and we were able to get it off to the printer and then pack everything up and send it back to New York. And then they hired Barry Owen and moved him to New York, and he eventually, I think he was like the editor because that was who they had. But and then I was the sort of the editorial director for a while, and then they said, well, if you're going to do this, you're going to have to come into the city, and we're going to really set up an office here and make it real. And I said, nah, I'm not going to drive into the city every day or take the train or the bus or anything. So I let that go. But it was an interesting story, and you will get a much more interesting version of it from David Bennell, who was there.
Yeah.
But then in the meantime, they were all starting up PC World and taking all of their freelancers, and trying to make it as difficult as possible for PC. And
which they did.
That was a big rivalry, obviously.
Boy. Yeah. So. And that it created a couple of months of problems at Creative too, because my editor is gone, and I really had gotten very dependent and relied on her for so many things, and whoops, I got to handle this myself. So that was and then the whole question mark was, okay, PC Magazine, Betsy going to stay with it? Well, in any event, so it was an time of uncertainty.
I mean, I'm sure it was a bad career move. I would.
Yeah, but PC still exists, magazine still exists.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
Creative computing doesn't.
But again, I don't know whether I still would have existed if I'd had to commute to New York.
Yeah.
It's a nasty commute. People, millions of people do it, but I just don't want to be one of them.
Yeah.
So I didn't mean to interrupt. To go back to your.
No, that's...
What are you most proud of? I mean, just of everything you've done. What's the thing you want on your tombstone that you know?
Well, okay, that obviously, not a one answer or a one word answer. It's almost a case of not proud isn't. I don't know. I'm not crazy about it. I guess the fact that I continue to hear from people that said, hey, I got my start in computing with basic computer games or with creative computing or with something that I had a hand in, that makes me feel pretty good. That you have a long-term or longer-term influence than just what you do at the time, that it's living on. It's not going to live on forever. I mean, basic isn't going to live on forever, but I think the idea of having some influence, positive influences on other people, on their lives, on their careers, that's good.
You help send people into the computer sciences field, probably in droves.
And specific individual accomplishments. Yeah, I wrote a couple of programs that are probably, in some cases still, or maybe not the program, but routines are still in use. But that's minor by comparison to having some influence on people and their career and their outlook and their future. That's way more important. Okay, so I wrote a great scheduling algorithm. So what?
And you really think that that's the same algorithm that's being used in Google Maps, and you'd said something?
Portions of it, yeah.
The same. Yeah.
But okay, that's minor. I look back and I say, oh boy, almost anything that I wrote in the last 30, 40 years, I would say if I were doing it today, I'd probably do it a little differently. But on the other hand, I didn't know then what I know now. So there's no one thing I can say, oh, that was a really great article or a great insight or something. Anything can be improved upon.
Sure. That's what disappoints me about computer magazines today, is I don't think that, because it seems like children are going to be able to go, it's not going to motivate anybody to do anything other than to use Word version 18 or whatever. There's no basic programs to type anymore, and it's not exciting in the same.
Well, Lee Felsenstein was mentioning that at breakfast. That was just yesterday. That kids today don't have any feeling about, or I should say, knowledge about the real basics of bits. What is a bit?
Right.
Nobody knows anymore. And he wanted to design some little simple piece of hardware. Well, I guess he has. That every kid, when they're in the 5th or 6th grade, will be exposed to this, so they'll have some concept of what bits are all about. And I think, you ever going to get that into schools today? No. So anyway, it's just kind of hopefully, and there's been some long-term influence. And what I'm doing now, even, which is mainly developing Bible studies for, I mostly have guys that have had a drug or alcohol addiction problem, and they come into this. They're in a rescue mission, and I'm hoping that these studies can have a little bit of an influence on the direction of their lives, a positive influence on where they go from here. So it's kind of people more than a specific thing or whatever.
Good answer. Do you have any subscriber? Is there any left? Like how many subscribers you had over time? Is that data around anymore? Or how many newsstand copies you had? I assume that's all.
Okay. Maximum. I think we mentioned that we had just about 500,000 in just about before Ziff killed it. And then they gave people a choice of 3 magazines that they expected to continue to publish: PC or Apple A+ or Mac User. And I'm guessing that most people went with PC. And one of the reasons actually was Ziff's rationale at that point was PC World had really grown a lot, and the circulation base of PC World and PC were very close. They were both about 500,000. PC might have had a small lead, but then by killing Creative Computing and rolling all of those subscribers, so let's say there was some overlap. Certainly there were some subscribers that got both magazines, but you probably had 250,000 additional subscribers into PC. So all of a sudden they go to advertise, we got 750,000 and that PC World only has 500,000. That was when PC had a huge growth spurt, and they started publishing those telephone book thick
I think
issues.
it probably still holds the record for the largest magazine ever published, whenever the issue was that they published. It was their biggest one. Because certainly magazines aren't getting bigger now. I mean, they didn't continue to increase in size after that.
No, and then they started publishing it twice a month. Wow. So that, I mean, the sort of nudge that the subscriber base of Creative gave to PC really separated them completely from PC World. So they had their reasons.
Okay. I made a chart of, I was goofing around. This is a chart of the page count of creative computing over its life.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's not even a question, it's just I made a chart. So every December, there's a peak for the big December issue, and then right at the end, then all of a sudden it just stopped.
Well, that's when Ziff had decided to kill it. Which was almost a year before. They basically let us publish for another 8 or 9 months after they had.
Yeah, there was a lot of back and
decision.
forth. Are they going to kill it? Are they not going to kill it?
But they weren't promoting. No subscription promotion. So they were saving their money.
Sure.
So if you don't promote the subscriptions, you're not going to get them.
Right.
Well, this is page count. So with that,
I know, but
advertisers.
it was advertising. Your subscribers
Go down, the advertising.
Well, it wasn't actually subscriber base didn't drop that much.
I took my hand to.
That's cool.
Yeah. And I don't know. I just thought I'd do a comparison, even though that's not what I'm really doing here. But in the beginning, though, Kilobyte was you guys were bi-monthly and they were monthly. So this is kind of
Right.
I couldn't know how to do it accurately, so anyway,
No.
their page count's actually higher because they were doing twice as much, but I just did a per issue thing. I don't have all the data here, so. You guys tend to publish larger issues?
Well, it was so dependent upon advertising.
Sure.
You got some magazines that, they would run 80-90% advertising if they could, and in some special interest fields you can get away with that because people are actually buying the magazine for the advertising, not for the editorial content.
Computer shopper, yeah, a good.
Yeah,
Good
well,
example.
that's exactly right, and even that's what the guys that bought military vehicles. I mean, they just went over so heavily to, I always believe that you should have at least 1/3 editorial content, preferably more. Oh my gosh, they dropped down to 20% edit. Yeah.
So there was one issue, the 10th anniversary issue. I don't mean to be picking on Wayne here, but there was just this quote that he happened to say, which I thought was interesting to me. I wanted to get your take on it. He said, this is in 1984, a computer system doesn't really stand a prayer anymore unless there's at least one dedicated independent magazine for its users.
Wayne said that?
Wayne said that.
Yeah.
Is that true? At the time, would you have agreed with that?
In 84?
Yeah.
Well, again, you got to look at where we were in the cycle at that point, and the cycle was that then there were more computers dying off than there were new ones being released. Because standardization had come in, really. I mean, you got the IBM PC, and everybody was producing a PC clone, and Apple kept going, and Atari and Commodore attempted to, but if you were to start a computer company at that point with a new computer, you'd need something to give your user base something to do with it, more than just what the manufacturer was selling. So that's probably accurate. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's accurate. I think that's what people started to expect.
Yeah. Another quote on the same issue, which we kind of touched on, from Tom Dwyer. He said, this is in 1984, he's saying, computer magazines used to have personality. and now they don't. And now they really don't.
Now they really don't.
I think they still had personality in 84, but now it's just...
Right.
Who was Tom Dwyer? I don't remember.
Tom Dwyer. He was at Pittsburgh, University of Pittsburgh. He came up with all of those neat applications from. He and Margot. He had the best basic primer of anybody. And in fact, the only one that both Kemeny and Kurtz endorsed outside of their own material. He had really written some good basic books. Pitt.
Let's see. I'm finishing up here. The internet says you were born in 1939. Is that right?
Yes.
Where were you born?
New York.
Excellent.
I was born in a hospital that my father had a hand in designing.
Really?
He was an architect up until the recession, and I think he perhaps designed the restrooms, but he wasn't. But
cool. And when were you two married?
1988. 25 years ago.
June 18, 1988.
Wow. Awesome. And what's your last name now?
Mine?
Yes.
All.
Yeah, okay.
I tried keeping this professional thing, and it was just way too confusing since that really wasn't my name anyway. That was my first husband's name, and then it just, this is way too complicated.
Okay. Yeah. My wife kept her maiden name, and she wishes she had. It's confusing. It just makes sense confusing.
And again, if it had been my maiden name, I might have, but it really wasn't. So.
Right. What haven't I asked you that I should have?
No, we kind of were noodling it around last night and said, man, this guy is thorough.
He's the most prepared interviewer.
So what you're thinking again? Because originally you were talking to me about covering Wayne's magazines and so on.
Yeah, my original thought was, when I had put no thought into it, was that it would be half about Wayne's magazine and half about creative. And then, first of all, after talking to him, I thought there's not enough to do that.
Did you talk to Wayne?
I talked to Wayne.
Well, that's good to know, right?
Half of the...
Carl Helmers didn't know if Wayne was still alive.
Oh, he's still alive.
Yeah, that's true. We asked Carl Helmers if Wayne was still alive, and he said,
Well, interestingly, there was another guy up there that published a magazine, computer magazine. The heck was the name of it? Up in New Hampshire, Peterborough, also. And it was one of the earlier would-be competitors to Datamation. So, I mean, it was much earlier. And, I mean, he was absolutely, totally convinced about the Kennedy assassination and had published a computer analysis of all the photos and everything else. And every single issue of the magazine had this stuff. And he and Wayne were on the same wavelength on that. So you ask Wayne about the conspiracy.
So anyway,
in
answer to your question, first it was going to be the two, and then that happened. And then also my wife was just like, if you're doing two, then it's going to seem like a compare and contrast thing. And that's not what I want to do. So now I'm thinking that this will be a project about the earliest computer magazines, the first computer magazines, and that way I can maybe 4 or 5 chapters, one on Cobalt, one on creative, maybe Byte, and I'm meeting with the editor of Byte in a couple of weeks at an event, maybe Interface Age or one of the other ones. I haven't really seen.
If you can find Bob Jones, that would be an interesting contrast.
Yeah.
He was Interface Age. He had a different perspective on a lot of things, and I had a lot of respect for him. He just didn't sell at the right time.
Yeah.
Too bad. But Bob Jones was a very serious, good guy.
Who were the other really early people? Dr. Dobbs, I don't know what.
Oh, Dr. Dobbs.
Oh, Jim Warren.
Yeah.
Jim Warren. Oh my goodness, that would give you another perspective altogether.
That's the California.
Yeah, Jim Warren and Bob Albrecht are tied together very closely, and they're both in sort of the alternative lifestyle. I don't know what
They probably had Friday afternoon pop parties in their magazines.
Oh boy, did they ever! Yes. But Jim also was the one that started the West Coast Computer Fairs, and he's a very capable guy. Dr. Dobbs' journal was, in a sense, well, you've probably seen it. You have, right? Okay, so you know that's really low-level programming rather than higher languages. We're talking about machine language, assembly language programming in there, and it was sort of like Microsystems was to Byte. Microsystems were the really serious hardware guy. Dr. Dobbs was for the really serious programmer compared to creative, which was, for people that just wanted to type something in that would work.
Basic, right? Yeah.
So.
Yeah, Dr. Dobbs, that was sort of like a totally different. It wasn't a competitor.
We didn't compete at all with them. I didn't view that we competed at all with them. They may have thought we did, but I don't think so.
Did they even have advertising?
Oh yeah, actually they did. And it kept going for a long time because it was a small little niche magazine. But Jim Warren would be an interesting guy, very interesting guy early on. I don't know about Albrecht, because they as you say, he published more tabloid newspapers, didn't really, I don't know if they ever published a magazine size thing or not, probably not. But it would give you a totally different perspective, because they're coming from the West Coast, looser, whatever.
You guys sounded pretty loose.
Yeah. Nothing compared to that.
Well, I think he was sort of in rebellion when he started working full-time at Creative Computing, because he was coming off AT&T, where he had to wear a suit to work every day. And so the first thing he did was, burn his suits and come to work in T-shirts and
I went
jeans
extremely
way back before anybody was doing that.
Extremely in the other direction, yeah, I did. But who else real early? Personal computing, which I think David Bonnell somehow was involved in at some point in their whole because they moved from the West Coast to New Jersey, and they were bought by who was that? It was mostly a company that published things like Hardware Age and advertiser-driven magazines. What was the name of it? Gosh, begins with an H. Well, and
Hachette?
Huh?
Hachette?
No, it's somewhere. Anyway, but when they brought personal computing, and I think Bonnell did maybe even started it out in Albuquerque. Then they moved it to New Jersey, and David said, "No, I'm not going to New Jersey. I'm a West Coast guy or whatever." And so then they changed the whole thing totally, and that's why I say they're one of the ones where they were so totally advertiser driven. Press release is a product review as far as they were concerned. They had some interesting stuff. They were a competitor only in name, but also because they got the advertising. They could go to the advertiser, we're going to publish a wonderful review. Give it to us. and so, but they were early, and they made money. There were a bunch of flash in the pan, magazines that lasted 2 or 3 or maybe 6 issues. Yeah. But nobody.
But only 1 in 7 made it. So.
That's 1 in 7, right?
That's right, exactly. Yeah. Well, you had the. Oh gosh, what was it again? I can't remember the name of some of these ones, but there was a very successful big magazine that published all Apple, basically reviews of Apple stuff. What was that one? Ooh. Yeah, Apple by themselves burned or spawned, I guess, half a dozen magazines.
Yeah, it was A Plus and Insider and
right, yeah.
Apple. There was a bunch of others, yeah.
And actually, this one that I can't think of the name of it turned out it was bigger and thicker than Creative. I mean, they were publishing a lot of stuff, but again, it was with all upbeat, positive, and so They really killed us on getting advertising, because we had been a leading publisher of Apple material for a while, but then all these others came along. But that one, whatever it was really it took a lot of advertising from us. When it all sort of settled out, you came back down to 8 or 9. The ones that we talked
Well, it said at one point there was like 200. I mean,
Yeah, I think that's correct.
We're probably counting newsletters.
Yeah, probably
Yeah.
industry-specific stuff and niche stuff, but still, I mean, you went from
Yes.
1 to 200
Right.
in 10 years. And
Yeah, that's true.
If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute, there are 2 ways you can help. You can help fund these interviews directly by contributing to my Patreon. A small monthly contribution will help offset the expenses of making these oral history interviews. Contribute at patreon.com/Savitz. Or make a tax-deductible contribution to the Internet Archive, a nonprofit digital library that has done incredible things to preserve computer history. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate. Thanks.